Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode. We're about to embark on a journey through history to a time that might feel both familiar and strangely distant. It's a journey into the quiet, unseen lives of women and the powerful, almost invisible legal systems that governed their existence. But before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy what you hear tonight, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to you. Now, let's begin. A gentle welcome and the world behind the veil. It's time to settle in and get comfortable. Find a soft, quiet space where you can relax and feel at peace. Close your eyes and take a deep, slow breath, letting the air fill your lungs. As you exhale, release all the tension you've been holding onto. Feel your shoulders relax, your jaw soften, and your body sink into the surface beneath you. With each breath, feel yourself becoming more and more at ease, letting go of the world around you and stepping into a peaceful, historic soundscape. Another slow, steady breath in and out. Imagine a soft, gentle mist swirling around you. It's cool and comforting, and it carries a sense of profound peace. This mist is a veil, a gateway to a place far away and long ago, a place where the world was painted in shades of sepia and shadow, a time of quiet courtyards and ancient traditions. The air is still and hushed, a perfect calm before our story begins. In the stillness of a medieval Norman court, a simple word took root, a word that would shape the lives of women for centuries to come: coverture. The word itself, meaning covering, was meant to sound gentle, like a blanket of protection. It suggested a husband's role was to shelter and provide for his wife. But for millions of women, it was far from that. It was a shroud, a legal concept so complete it made a married woman vanish in the eyes of the law. This wasn't just a social custom, it was the foundation of the legal system, a doctrine so powerful it governed every aspect of a woman's existence. Imagine a soft, steady rain beginning to fall outside. Each drop lands with a gentle tap, creating a peaceful, rhythmic sound. As the rain falls, we can listen to the story of this strange, old world. The legal obliteration of self. According to Sir William Blackstone, the revered legal thinker of the time, a husband and wife were one person in law. This meant that when a woman spoke her marriage vows, her legal existence was suspended. It was as if she were a gentle, flickering flame, and her husband was a glass lantern placed around her, extinguishing her light. Her legal identity was not just diminished, it was incorporated or consolidated into that of her husband. She could no longer own property, sign contracts, or even speak for herself in a court of law. This was not a metaphor, it was a harsh, binding legal reality. Prior to marriage, a woman could freely execute a will, enter into contracts, sue or be sued in her own name, and sell or give away her real estate. She was a legal person. But the moment she married, she gave up all of these things. It was a complete and total surrender of her legal self. Listen to the gentle sound of the rain, and let the words drift over you like a soft whisper. We can imagine the story of a young woman named Caroline Norton, just 19 years old, who married a man named George Norton in 1827. The moment she spoke her vows, she ceased to exist as a person under British law. Her property, her earnings, her children, even her own body belonged entirely to her husband. She could not sign contracts, could not sue or be sued, and had no legal recourse if her husband chose to beat her or lock her away. The Norton marriage, with all its tragic consequences, would become a notorious example of coverture's horrors. The gentle rain continues, a soothing rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. It reminds us of the quiet, unrecorded moments of countless women. Women whose property simply disappeared the moment they said, "I do." Imagine a wealthy heiress, Frances Power Cobb, who inherited a large sum of money from her father. The moment she married, her husband claimed it all as his own, as if it had never existed in the first place. "I might as well have thrown the money into the sea," she later wrote. "My husband took possession of it as absolutely as if I had never existed." Imagine a woman named Elizabeth Parsons, a woman with her own inheritance. When her husband decided to steal her money, he had her committed to a private asylum in 1858. Under this old legal system, a husband could confine his wife anywhere he pleased, and she had no legal way to stop him. This legal extinction touched every part of a woman's life. She couldn't make a will without her husband's permission. She couldn't say no to medical treatments he chose for her. She couldn't even stop him from reading her private letters. It was a world where, as one observer noted, a married woman had no legal existence, where she was considered her husband's property, no different from his horse or his dog. The rain gets a little lighter now, a soft pitter-patter. The world is hushed and still. The dark side of domesticity. Hidden behind the respectable-looking facades of Victorian homes, there were silent struggles. Wife-beating was not only legal, but actively encouraged by religious and medical authorities as a husband's divine right and duty. The popular legal maxim held that a man could beat his wife with a stick, no thicker than his thumb. While this restraint was rarely observed, it served as a brutal justification for the widespread domestic violence. Medical records from the time reveal the true extent of this brutality. Women arrived at hospitals with broken bones, knife wounds and burns from hot pokers. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, one of the first female doctors, documented cases of women whose husbands had bitten off their ears, broken their jaws, and deliberately blinded them. Even the most intimate parts of a woman's life were controlled. Dr. William Acton, whose medical textbook was the standard authority on Victorian sexuality, wrote in 1857 that the husband has the right to enforce sexual intercourse, as this is the wife's duty and his natural right. What we now recognize as marital rape was not only legal, but considered a husband's sacred prerogative. The Diaries of a Woman named Lady Colin Campbell, published after a famous divorce trial, revealed the quiet suffering many wives endured. Her husband infected her with a terrible illness, then continued to force himself on her despite her pleas. He would not be denied his rights, she wrote, though it meant my death. Let the gentle drizzle lull you, carrying you deeper into a state of rest. The quiet pitter-patter reminds us of the many unheard stories, the silent pains of women trapped in their homes. The trap of motherhood. The constant threat of pregnancy was a shadow that followed every married woman. With no access to reliable contraception and no legal right to refuse her husband, a woman's body was never her own. She was often pregnant, again and again, throughout her reproductive years. Medical records show women bearing 15 or more children. Each pregnancy was a risk, a chance of death. Maternal mortality rates were terrifyingly high, but even surviving childbirth only tightened the chains. Under this old system, children belonged entirely to their fathers. A mother had no legal relationship to her own child. If she attempted to leave an abusive marriage, her husband could forbid her from ever seeing her children again. Caroline Norton, in her agony, wrote in a letter, "I am a prisoner here, and my children are my prison wardens." She would not see her youngest son for 2 years. If she died, her husband could give the children away without consulting her family. If he chose to beat or abuse the children, she had no legal power to intervene. For poor women, the situation was even more desperate. Parliamentary investigations documented cases of fathers selling their children into industrial labour or sexual slavery, with mothers powerless to intervene. Imagine the quiet despair, the silent tears, of a mother separated from her child forever, with no legal recourse to bring them home. The drizzle has stopped now. The world is still and silent, a quiet after the rain. The air is fresh and calm. The economic stranglehold. Victorian marriage was designed to create an economic trap, making it nearly impossible for a woman to leave. Even if a woman worked, every penny she earned belonged to her husband. Under coverture, he could spend it as he chose, save it, or simply refuse to give her money for basic necessities. Imagine a successful dressmaker named Ellen Woodhouse, who built her business from nothing with over 20 employees. Her husband, who contributed nothing, simply took her money to fund his gambling and drinking. When Ellen attempted to open her own bank account in 1858, The bank refused, explaining that married women could not own property or enter contracts. Ellen wrote to her sister, "I have built an empire, only to watch a fool destroy it, coin by coin." Working-class women faced even more brutal realities. In the textile mills of Lancashire, married women comprised nearly half the workforce, yet they could not touch their own wages. Mill owners paid husbands directly, even when wives performed the labour. Parliamentary investigations revealed that many husbands would collect their wives' wages on Friday afternoon, spend them in taverns by Saturday night, then return home to beat their wives on Sunday for failing to provide adequate meals. Divorce, even for wealthy women, offered no economic escape. The few women who successfully obtained legal separations discovered they had no right to alimony or support. When Caroline Norton finally secured a legal separation from her violent husband in 1855, she received no financial settlement despite his substantial wealth. She was forced to support herself through her writing while he retained all of their marital property. For working-class women, formal divorce was financially impossible. The legal costs represented more than a working man's total earnings for 5 years. These women remained trapped in violent marriages with no legal or economic alternatives. Now, imagine a soft, warm light beginning to glow. It's the light of courage, a quiet hope that pushed through the darkness. The medical conspiracy. The Victorian medical establishment provided a pseudo-scientific justification for women's subjugation. Leading physicians declared that women's reproductive organs made them inherently unstable, childlike, and incapable of rational thought. Dr. Henry Maudsley, one of Britain's most respected psychiatrists, wrote that the female constitution is dominated by the reproductive system. Women are essentially ovarian in their mental and moral characteristics. This medical misogyny had devastating practical consequences. Physicians routinely diagnosed rebellious wives with hysteria, moral insanity, or nymphomania for behaviours that would be considered normal in men. The medical journal The Lancet published detailed case studies of women committed to asylums for excessive reading, refusing sexual intercourse, or expressing political opinions. Private madhouses became dumping grounds for inconvenient wives. Parliamentary investigations in the 1860s revealed that many asylum inmates were sane women, whose husbands had committed them to gain control of their property or to pursue affairs. The alleged Lunatics' Friend Society, founded in 1845, documented hundreds of cases of women illegally confined by their husbands with the complicity of corrupt physicians. Let that warm, steady light grow brighter. It represents the strength of these women, who, against all odds, chose to fight. The rise of courage. Despite the overwhelming legal, economic, and social barriers, some women found a way to escape. Their stories, like a small, persistent fire, lit the way for others. Caroline Norton, the young woman who lost her children, began a tireless campaign to change the law. She wrote pamphlets like The Separation of Mother and Child by the Law of Custody of Infants Considered, exposing the horrors of absolute paternal rights to a shocked public. She lobbied Parliament for years, facing social ostracism and financial ruin, until her efforts led to the Custody of Infants Act of 1839, which, for the first time, granted mothers limited access to their young children. It was a small step, but it was a crack in the wall, a testament to her remarkable strength. And there were other women, like Frances Wright, a wealthy American heiress, who chose never to marry at all, scandalizing society by choosing to live a life of freedom. Her financial independence allowed her to declare in 1829 that she would not place myself voluntarily in the position of a slave. She paid the price in social isolation and constant public attack, but she found a different kind of freedom. Some working-class women found escape through informal networks of female solidarity. In London's East End, women created underground railways of safe houses where abused wives could hide with their children. A few privileged women used their family connections to circumvent covetous restrictions, having their fathers quietly establish trusts that kept their inheritance beyond their husband's reach. The vast majority of women never escaped this system. They lived and died as their husband's property their stories lost to time. But the struggles of these few brave women, widely publicised through newspapers and pamphlets, began to awaken the public. Their combined voices started a slow, quiet change. By the 1870s, their efforts had created the first sustained challenge to coverture's absolute authority, laying the groundwork for the legal reforms that would slowly begin to restore women's humanity under the law. The legacy and the peace. Now, imagine the warm light surrounding you completely, a gentle, comforting blanket of peace. We look back at those elegant Victorian houses and imagine a world of quiet conversations and graceful people. But behind the beautiful facades, in those silent rooms, lived women whose legal existence was extinguished, their lives owned by another. Their stories, once silent, now speak to us, reminding us that respectability and brutality have always been intimate companions, that progress and oppression can wear the same face. The slow, incremental victories of a few courageous women remind us that change is possible, even against the most powerful and deeply entrenched systems. Let the warm light fill your mind and body. You are safe. You are at peace. You are surrounded by a deep, beautiful quiet. And with each breath you can feel yourself sinking deeper into a state of rest, and calm, and deep, peaceful sleep. Hello, dear listeners. Or should I say, dear viewers? Because I'm super curious. Where in the world are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below with your location and the time. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to my dulcet tones all over the globe. Oh, and while you're at it, give that like button a quick tap. You know, for good karma. Alright, buckle up, buttercups, because tonight we're diving headfirst into the glorious, perplexing, and utterly bonkers world of Victorian social rules. Trust me, these folks had some seriously bizarre ideas about proper behaviour that'll make your most awkward modern moments seem like a walk in the park. Or, rather, a very slow, deliberately paced, and heavily chaperoned walk in the park. So, imagine this. Congratulations, you've just woken up in London, circa 1850. Your eyes blink open to find yourself in a narrow iron bed frame. Forget your memory foam mattress. This one's stuffed with horsehair. Slightly prickly, slightly lumpy, like sleeping on a grumpy hedgehog. The room is chilly. Really chilly. The fire you fell asleep to has died down to glowing embers, leaving just enough light to make out the shadowy, bulky wardrobe, the washstand with its ceramic basin, and a dressing table with a tiny smudged mirror. Outside, you hear the distant clatter of iron-rimmed carriage wheels on cobblestones, a dog barks, and the air. Oh, the air. It smells of coal smoke. Always coal smoke in London. It seeps in through every crack, under every door, through every window frame, mixing with the faint scent of bergamot oil from the perfume bottle on your dressing table. That sharp, citrusy smell everyone's dabbing on these days. The sheets around you are cotton, not particularly soft, but at least they're clean. And your nightgown? Flannel, buttoned right up to your chin. Good heavens. Imagine someone seeing your neck or wrists while you're sleeping. The scandal. On the table beside your bed sits a small bell. You reach for it and give it a tentative ring. Almost immediately you hear footsteps on the stairs, and your maid, Mary, appears at the door, already fully dressed despite the ungodly hour. "Good morning, miss," she says with a small curtsy. "Shall I draw the curtains?" Without waiting for your answer, she crosses to the window and pulls back heavy velvet drapes, letting in the weak, grey London daylight. The glass is smeared with soot from the countless chimneys belching smoke into the air. "What would you like to wear today, miss?" Mary asks, moving to the wardrobe and opening it to reveal an array of dresses, each more elaborate than the last. And here, my friends, is where your crash course in Victorian social rules truly begins. Because what you wear, how you speak, how you walk, who you talk to, when you talk to them, and basically everything else you do today will be governed by the most complex unwritten social code humans have ever created. The Victorians were essentially playing life on expert mode. One wrong move, and boom, social disgrace. You have a morning call with Mrs. Hartley at 11, Mary reminds you, as she selects a day dress in a deep blue, and then tea with your cousin Emily at 4 o'clock. Now, these morning calls are your first head-scratcher. Despite the name, they never, ever happen in the morning. Morning calls take place between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. I know it makes zero sense, but call them afternoon calls, and people will look at you like you've lost your mind. Oh, and they last exactly 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16, 15. And you better have a pocket watch to time yourself, because overstaying is considered extremely rude. Mary helps you into your clothes, which, let me tell you, is a whole process. First, the chemise, basically a long cotton slip, then the corset. Oh boy, the corset. Mary puts it around your waist and starts pulling the laces tighter. Tighter, you gasp, remembering that a proper Victorian lady is supposed to have a waist you can span with your hands. Yes, miss, Mary says, yanking harder until you can barely breathe, your ribs shifting slightly, your lungs only expanding about halfway. This, my dear, is fashion. Next come the petticoats. 1, 2, 3 of them, each adding a layer of bulk to your lower half. Then the crinoline, a cage-like structure made of steel hoops that makes your skirt bell out around you like a giant lampshade. Finally, the dress goes over it all, with its tight bodice and enormous skirt. By the time you're done, you're wearing about 15 pounds of clothing. Mary does your hair, pulling it back severely from your face and arranging it in a neat bun at the nape of your neck. No flyaways allowed. Everything controlled. Everything proper. "Will you be wearing gloves or mittens today, miss?" Mary asks, holding up both options. "Gloves," you say, remembering that a proper Victorian lady never, ever shows her bare hands in public. Ever. Your hands should remain mysteriously concealed at all times, like some kind of weird, hand-based modesty rule. As Mary helps you with your gloves, you remember another cardinal rule: no perfume. Queen Victoria herself has declared that the heavy, musky perfumes of the previous era are vulgar. Instead, you dab a little lemon and bergamot oil on your handkerchief, just enough to smell clean, not enough to suggest you're trying to seduce anyone with your scandalous scent. Fully dressed, you make your way downstairs for breakfast. The house is coming alive around you. Servants scurry about, dusting, sweeping, polishing. The cook has been up since 5 a.m. preparing the morning meal. In the dining room, your father sits at the head of the table, newspaper in hand. Your mother is at the other end, already writing correspondence. They're both fully dressed, because Victorians wouldn't dream of appearing at breakfast in anything resembling casual clothes. "Good morning," you say, taking your seat. Your father lowers his newspaper just enough to nod at you, then raises it again. Public displays of affection, even between family members, are not the Victorian way. No hugs, no kisses on the cheek. Breakfast is substantial. Eggs, bacon, kidneys, toast, porridge. Victorians eat a lot at breakfast. It's their biggest meal of the day. You pick at yours, your corset making it impossible to take more than tiny bites. "Remember, Jane," your mother says, not looking up from her letter, "Mrs. Hartley's daughter has just become engaged. Be sure to congratulate her, but don't ask any details about the wedding. That would be presumptuous." You nod, making a mental note. This is typical of the invisible rulebook that governs Victorian society. You must acknowledge important life events, but never appear too interested in them. Curiosity is vulgar. After breakfast, you have a few hours before your morning call. You decide to work on your needlepoint, a suitably feminine pursuit. Idle hands are the devil's workshop after all, and a proper Victorian lady is never idle. You sit by the window in the drawing room, stitching a pattern of flowers onto a piece of linen. Your mother joins you, taking up her own needlework. "I saw Mrs. Fairchild yesterday," she says casually. "Her son has returned from university." You keep your eyes on your stitching, even though your heart beats a little faster. Thomas Fairchild. You danced with him at a ball last season before he went away to Oxford. He had kind eyes and didn't step on your feet, which, frankly, puts him ahead of most of the young men you've danced with. "How nice," you say, your voice carefully neutral. "She mentioned he asked after you," your mother continues, watching your reaction closely. You feel your cheeks warm, but keep your expression composed. "Did he? That's very civil of him." Your mother smiles slightly, satisfied with your restrained response. Showing too much interest in a young man would be improper. The game of Victorian courtship is all about pretending you're not playing it. At precisely 11:15, you put on your bonnet, gloves and cloak and set out with your mother for Mrs. Hartley's house. You carry a small card case containing your visiting cards, little pieces of paper with your name printed on them. These are essential to the ritual of morning calls. Mrs. Hartley lives just a few streets away, but walking too quickly would be unladylike. You adopt the proper Victorian lady's pace. Small steps, back straight, eyes modestly downcast. Your enormous skirt swings as you walk, occasionally threatening to knock over small children or dogs who get too close. People pass you on the street. Men tip their hats. You acknowledge them with the slightest nod, never making eye contact with strangers. A gentleman would never speak to a lady he hasn't been formally introduced to, and a lady would certainly never speak to a strange gentleman. You arrive at Mrs. Hartley's at precisely 11 o'clock. Punctuality is crucial. Being early is as bad as being late. Both suggest you don't have enough engagements to fill your day, which would be embarrassing. The butler answers the door. You hand him your visiting cards, one from you and one from your mother. He takes them on a small silver tray and shows you into the drawing room, where Mrs. Hartley and her daughter Charlotte are waiting. Everyone curtsies. No one hugs or kisses cheeks. Physical contact is kept to an absolute minimum. "How kind of you to call," Mrs. Hartley says, gesturing for you to sit down. You arrange yourself carefully on a small sofa, mindful of your enormous skirt. Sitting gracefully in a crinoline is an art form. You must perch right on the edge of your seat to accommodate the steel cage around your lower half. "We were so pleased to hear your happy news," your mother says to Charlotte, who blushes appropriately. "Thank you," Charlotte murmurs, eyes downcast. "Mr. Edwards is very kind." And that's it. That's all the information you're going to get about Charlotte's engagement. Not what her fiancé is like, not when the wedding will be, not how they met or whether she loves him. Those questions would be prying, and Victorians do not pry. The conversation moves on to safe topics. The weather, cloudy but not raining. Recent sermons at church, uplifting but not too long. And a musical performance you all attended, accomplished but not showy. Everything is described in the most moderate terms possible. Strong opinions are for the lower classes. After exactly 15 minutes, your mother gives an almost imperceptible nod. That's your cue. You both stand up. "It was so lovely to see you," Mrs. Hartley says, also standing. More curtsies, more pleasantries, then you're back out on the street. Morning call successfully completed. "That went well," your mother says as you walk home. "Charlotte looked well, didn't she?" "Very well," you agree. In Victorian conversation, "well" is the highest praise one can give. Back at home, you have a light luncheon, then spend the afternoon reading an improving book. Nothing too exciting or romantic, of course. Novels that stir the emotions are considered potentially dangerous for young ladies. At 4 o'clock, you have tea with your cousin Emily, who comes to your house. The ritual is similar to the morning call, but slightly less formal since Emily is family. You still maintain perfect posture, still speak in measured tones about appropriate subjects, still avoid anything that might be considered gossip. After Emily leaves, you have a few hours before dinner. You practice the piano for exactly 1 hour, enough to maintain your skills without suggesting that you harbour inappropriate ambitions of becoming a professional musician. Dinner is at 7 p.m, a relatively informal family meal since you're not entertaining guests. Still, you change into a different dress, slightly fancier than your day dress, but not as elaborate as an evening gown. Victorians change clothes multiple times a day, each outfit precisely calibrated to the specific social context. At the dinner table, conversation is polite, but not particularly personal. Your father discusses business matters with your brother. Your mother mentions charity work she's involved with. You listen attentively, occasionally offering a gentle opinion when directly addressed. After dinner, you all retire to the drawing room. Your brother and father might have brandy and cigars in the study, but ladies don't drink anything stronger than sherry, and they certainly don't smoke. Instead, you play the piano for the family or work on your needlepoint some more. By 10 o'clock, everyone is ready for bed. Another day of Victorian propriety successfully navigated. As Mary helps you undress, removing the layers one by one, you finally feel like you can breathe again when the corset comes off. "Will you need anything else, miss?" Mary asks, as she helps you into your nightgown. "No thank you, Mary," you say, settling into bed with a small sigh of relief. She curtsies and leaves, taking the oil lamp with her. The room falls into darkness, except for the faint glow from the banked fire in the grate. You lie there thinking about the day, all those rules, all that restraint. It's exhausting. But there's also something almost comforting about knowing exactly what's expected of you at every moment. As you drift towards sleep, you wonder what tomorrow will bring in this world of rigid propriety and hidden feelings. You'll need to navigate a formal dinner party, which means a whole new set of rules to remember. But that can wait until morning. For now, you let the distant sounds of the city lull you toward dreams. Your last thought before sleep takes you is of Thomas Fairchild and his kind eyes. In this world where so much is restrained and controlled, even the smallest connection feels significant. You wonder if you'll see him soon, and what complicated dance of social rules you'll have to perform if you do. Outside, fog rolls in from the Thames, wrapping the city in its damp embrace. Gas lamps cast hazy halos of light on the cobblestone streets. A carriage passes, wheels clattering. A night watchman calls the hour, and all across London, behind the prim facades of countless houses, Victorians lie in their beds, constrained by their social rules, even in their dreams. Morning arrives with the sound of Mary drawing back your curtains again. The pale winter sun barely penetrates the ever-present London fog. Another day of Victorian propriety awaits you. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, placing a cup of hot chocolate on your bedside table. "It's going to be a busy day." You sip the chocolate as Mary lays out your morning dress. Today is indeed important. You're attending a formal dinner party at the Fairchilds' house. Yes, those Fairchilds. Thomas will be there. The morning passes in a blur of preparations. Your mother insists you practice piano for 2 hours instead of the usual one. "The Fairchilds may ask you to play," she explains. "Mrs. Fairchild mentioned their new pianoforte. It would be rude to decline." Another Victorian rule to remember: never refuse a direct request to demonstrate an accomplishment, but also never appear too eager to show off. It's a delicate balance. After lunch, you take a light walk in the nearby park with your mother. The crisp winter air is actually cleaner than inside most homes, where coal fires fill the rooms with a fine layer of soot. Ladies stroll along the pathways, nodding politely to acquaintances. Gentlemen tip their hats as they pass. "Remember," your mother says quietly as you walk, "at dinner, you'll be seated according to rank. Don't appear surprised by your placement, whatever it may be." You nod. The Victorian dinner table is a battlefield of social hierarchy. The most important male guest sits to the right of the hostess. The most important female guest sits to the right of the host. Everyone else is arranged in descending order of social importance. Being seated near the bottom of the table is a clear message about your status. Back at home, preparation for the evening begins in earnest. A formal dinner party requires your finest appearance. Mary runs a bath for you, adding a few drops of rose oil to the water. The bathroom is chilly despite the small fire burning in the grate. You bathe quickly, shivering as you step out onto the cold floor. Then the dressing begins. Tonight requires full evening dress. Your corset is laced even tighter than usual. Your crinoline is wider. Your gown is pale blue silk with delicate lace trim. The neckline is lower than your day dress, showing your collarbones and a hint of shoulder. The maximum amount of skin a respectable unmarried woman can display. Your hair's arranged in an elaborate style, with small silk flowers pinned among the curls. A light dusting of rice powder on your face gives you the fashionable pale complexion. No rouge, though. Only actresses and women of questionable virtue wear obvious makeup. "You look beautiful, miss," Mary says, stepping back to admire her work. You barely recognise yourself in the mirror. You look exactly like a proper Victorian young lady should. Poised, controlled, elegant. Your waist impossibly small, your skirt ridiculously wide. Fashion is suffering, but fashion must be obeyed. Your father has arranged for a carriage to take you to the Fairchilds. It's a cold night, and walking would ruin your carefully arranged appearance. Plus, arriving in a carriage rather than on foot displays your family's prosperity. The carriage pulls up outside a large townhouse on one of London's most fashionable streets. Lights blaze from every window. A footman in livery opens the carriage door and helps you step down. Inside, the house is warm and bright. Gas lighting, the latest modern convenience, illuminates the entrance hall. A maid takes your cloak, revealing your evening finery. The butler announces your family as you enter the drawing room, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson and Miss Jane Wilson. All heads turn. You feel your cheeks warm, but keep your expression composed as you make your curtsies to Mr. and Mrs. Fairchild. And there, standing beside his mother, is Thomas. He's taller than you remember, his evening clothes emphasizing his broad shoulders. He bows perfectly, not too deep, which would seem obsequious, but not too shallow, which would be disrespectful. "Miss Wilson," he says, his voice deeper than you recall. "How pleasant to see you again." "Mr. Fairchild," you reply, your voice carefully modulated. "I trust Oxford agrees with you." The smallest of smiles crosses his face. "It does, thank you, though London has attractions that Oxford cannot claim." Is he flirting with you? It's so hard to tell with Victorian men. Their compliments are buried under layers of propriety. More guests arrive, the drawing room fills with the murmur of polite conversation. Everyone stands. Sitting before dinner would suggest eagerness to eat, which would be vulgar. You notice Charlotte Hartley and her fiancé, Mr. Edwards, across the room. They stand a respectable distance apart. No touching, no meaningful glances. To the casual observer, they might not even be engaged. When all the guests have arrived, the butler announces that dinner is served. Now comes the complex choreography of entering the dining room. The host, Mr. Fairchild, offers his arm to the highest-ranking female guest. The highest-ranking male guest offers his arm to the hostess. Everyone else pairs off according to status, forming a procession into the dining room. You find yourself paired with a middle-aged gentleman you've never met before. Thomas, you notice, is escorting an elderly lady with an elaborate turban of fabric on her head. The dining room dazzles with crystal, silver and candlelight. The table gleams with polished silver and fine china. Each place setting has an intimidating array of utensils: fish forks, soup spoons, dessert spoons, multiple knives, and more. Using the wrong utensil would be a social catastrophe. You're seated about halfway down the table, not at the bottom, which is encouraging, but not near the top either. Thomas is on the opposite side, several seats away. During a Victorian dinner, you primarily converse with the gentleman seated to your left and right, never across the table. The gentleman to your right turns to you. "I understand you're acquainted with my nephew, Miss Wilson. Charles Pembroke, I believe. You danced at Lady Hamilton's ball last season." You search your memory. Yes, you did dance with a Mr. Pembroke. He stepped on your feet 3 times and talked exclusively about his horse. "Yes, indeed," you say pleasantly. "Mr. Pembroke is an accomplished dancer." A small white lie in the service of social harmony. The dinner progresses through multiple courses. Soup, fish, meat, game, dessert, each with its own set of serving rituals and appropriate utensils. You carefully take small bites, chewing quietly. A lady is never seen to eat heartily, even if she's starving. Conversation around the table is carefully balanced between interesting and inoffensive. Politics, religion, money, and anything personal are strictly avoided. Instead, people discuss recent theatrical performances, exhibitions at the Royal Academy, the weather, and travels to acceptable destinations like Italy or France. You notice Thomas watching you from across the table. When your eyes meet, he quickly looks away. In this world of rigid social rules, even eye contact can be loaded with meaning. After dessert comes the most gendered ritual of the Victorian dinner party. Mrs. Fairchild catches the eye of the highest-ranking female guest and rises from her seat. This is the signal for all the ladies to leave the dining room, leaving the gentlemen to their port and cigars. You follow the procession of women back to the drawing room. This gender segregation serves multiple purposes in Victorian society. It allows the men to discuss male topics like business and politics. It gives women a chance to use the chamber pot if needed, a necessity given the voluminous skirts that make frequent bathroom trips difficult. And it preserves the fiction that ladies are too delicate to be exposed to cigars and strong drink. In the drawing room, the women arrange themselves in conversational groups. Mrs. Fairchild ensures that Charlotte and her fiancé's mother are seated together, a sign of approval for the upcoming marriage. "Will you play for us, Miss Wilson?" Mrs. Fairchild asked, gesturing to the pianoforte in the corner. Ah, here it is, the dreaded request. You can't refuse, but you also can't appear too eager. "If you wish it, Mrs. Fairchild," you say modestly, "though I'm sure there are more accomplished musicians present." "Nonsense," Mrs. Fairchild says. "We've all heard of your talent." You move to the piano, arranging your enormous skirt as best you can on the small bench. You play a piece by Mozart, technically challenging enough to show skill, but not so flamboyant as to seem showy. You keep your posture perfect, your face composed in a slight smile. No grimacing or swaying with the music. That would be considered overly emotional. When you finish, the ladies applaud politely. You acknowledge their approval with a modest nod, then return to your seat. Your hands are trembling slightly, but no one notices. A proper Victorian lady never shows nervousness. About half an hour after the ladies left the dining room, the gentlemen join them. The smell of cigars clings to their clothes. Some have high colour in their cheeks from the port. The older men settle into chairs, while the younger ones circulate among the ladies. Thomas makes his way to your side, stopping to exchange pleasantries with several other guests first, to avoid appearing too eager. "I enjoyed your performance, Miss Wilson," he says, when he finally reaches you. "Mozart, was it not?" "Yes," you reply. "His sonata in C major." "You play with great feeling," he says, then adds quickly, "but appropriate restraint, of course." You smile slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Fairchild. I understand you're studying classics at Oxford?" And so begins the Victorian version of flirtation. A carefully controlled conversation about impersonal topics, with real meaning hidden between the lines. You discuss books, nothing too romantic, music, nothing too passionate, and art, nothing too avant-garde. All the while, you're assessing each other. Is he intelligent? Is she well-read? Would our temperaments suit? You notice Mrs. Fairchild watching you both with a satisfied expression. Mothers are the primary architects of Victorian matches. No doubt she invited your family tonight specifically to throw you and Thomas together. After what seems like only a few minutes, but is actually nearly half an hour, Thomas reluctantly excuses himself. "I should speak with Miss Hartley and offer my congratulations on her engagement," he says. "Of course," you reply, hiding your disappointment. "It was pleasant conversing with you, Mr. Fairchild." He bows slightly. "The pleasure was mine, Miss Wilson." As he walks away, your mother appears at your side. "He seems quite attentive," she murmurs. "Does he?" you say, pretending you hadn't noticed. Your mother isn't fooled. "Don't appear too interested, Jane. Nothing scares away a potential suitor faster than an eager young lady." The evening continues with more music, some card games, and continuous circulation of guests around the room. Everyone is careful to speak to everyone else. No one stays in one conversation too long. The appearance of social harmony is paramount. At precisely 11 o'clock, the first guests begin to leave. This signals that it's acceptable for others to depart as well. The Victorians have strict rules even about when to end a party. Your father catches your mother's eye, and she nods slightly. Time to go. You make your farewells to the hosts, thanking them properly for their hospitality. Thomas is nearby and bows to you one last time. "Until we meet again, Miss Wilson," he says softly. "Good evening, Mr. Fairchild," you reply, your voice giving away nothing of your inner thoughts. Outside, your carriage is waiting. As you settle into the seat, you finally allow yourself a small sigh of relief. The evening went well. No social missteps, and Thomas seemed genuinely interested in you. "A successful evening," your father declares as the carriage pulls away. This is high praise from him indeed. "Your mother agrees," your mother says. "Mrs. Fairchild mentioned they're hosting a small musical evening next week. We're to receive an invitation." Your heart beats a little faster. Another opportunity to see Thomas. Back at home, Mary helps you undress, carefully hanging up your evening gown and putting away your jewellery. Your hair, so elaborately arranged, tumbles down your back as she removes the pins. "Did you enjoy yourself, miss?" Mary asks as she brushes out your hair. "It was a pleasant evening," you say, maintaining your composure even with your lady's maid. Servants observe everything and gossip among themselves. Any show of excitement about Thomas might reach his household through the servants' network. When Mary leaves, you sit at your dressing table for a moment, looking at your reflection. behind your composed expression, your mind is racing. Did Thomas really seek you out specifically? What did his mother's watchful gaze mean? Will he call on you, or must you wait to meet again at the musical evening? Dating in the Victorian era is like playing chess while blindfolded. Every move matters, but half the time you don't even know you're making a move. And the stakes are high. Your entire future happiness depends on making a good match. You move to the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to look out at the foggy London night. Gas lamps create halos of light in the mist. A lone, handsome cab clatters past on the cobblestones. Somewhere out there, Thomas Fairchild is perhaps thinking of you too. But in this world of rigid propriety and hidden feelings, who can tell? You'll have to wait and see what the next social encounter brings, and what new rules you'll need to navigate. Your next encounter with Thomas Fairchild comes sooner than expected. The very next day, in fact. You're reading in the front parlour, half-heartedly turning pages of a suitably improving book about botany, when Mary appears at the door. "Mr. Thomas Fairchild is here, miss," she announces. "He's asking if you and your mother are receiving visitors." Your heart jumps, but your face remains perfectly composed. "Please tell him we are, Mary, and inform my mother." A proper Victorian young lady is never, ever left alone with a gentleman caller. Your mother must be present for the entire visit. Even stepping out of the room for a minute would be scandalous. Mary curtsies and disappears. You have about 30 seconds to prepare yourself. You check your hair in the small mirror above the fireplace, straighten your posture, and pick up your book again, arranging yourself to look naturally occupied. When he enters, the door opens, and there's Thomas, looking even more handsome in daylight. His formal morning clothes fit him perfectly. Dark coat, perfectly tied cravat, polished boots. He's carrying his top hat and gloves. A gentleman always removes his hat indoors, but keeps his gloves on until seated. "Miss Wilson," he says, bowing, "I hope I find you well today." "Quite well, thank you, Mr. Fairchild," you reply, setting your book aside and gesturing to a chair. "Please be seated. My mother will join us momentarily." Thomas sits, finally removing his gloves and placing them inside his hat. This is the Victorian equivalent of getting comfortable. "I enjoyed the evening at your parents' home last night," you say, keeping your tone pleasant but not overly warm. "As did I," he replies. "My mother was particularly impressed with your musical performance." Before you can respond, your mother enters the room. Thomas immediately stands. A gentleman always rises when a lady enters. "Mr. Fairchild," your mother says, smiling. "What a pleasant surprise." Thomas bows again. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope I'm not calling at an inconvenient time." "Not at all," your mother assures him, taking a seat on the sofa beside you. Now the real dance begins. "I've come to extend an invitation," Thomas says. "My mother is hosting a small musical evening next Tuesday. She hopes Miss Wilson and your good selves will be able to attend." "Ah, so that's why he's here. Not just to see you, but as his mother's messenger. Still, he could have sent a servant with a written invitation. The fact that he came personally means something." "How kind," your mother says. "We would be delighted to accept." "Excellent," Thomas says, his eyes flickering to you. "My mother also mentioned she would be grateful if Miss Wilson might consider performing. Your rendition of Mozart last night was much admired. Now you understand completely. Mrs. Fairchild wants to show you off to her friends. You're being evaluated as a potential daughter-in-law." "I would be happy to play," you say modestly, though I'm sure your mother has engaged more accomplished musicians. Thomas shakes his head. "None that I'm aware of. Your talent would be the highlight of the evening." Is he actually complimenting you directly? That's borderline scandalous in Victorian terms. Your mother smoothly steps in. "My daughter practices diligently, Mr. Fairchild. We're grateful for the opportunity to share the fruits of her hard work." The conversation continues with this kind of formal back and forth, covering mutual acquaintances, upcoming social events. Thomas is careful to address most of his remarks to your mother, only occasionally looking at you directly. This is proper Victorian form. After exactly 15 minutes, the prescribed length for a morning call, Thomas stands. "I've taken enough of your time, Mrs. Wilson, Miss Wilson," he says. "I'll convey your acceptance to my mother. She'll be most pleased." Your mother rings for Mary, who appears to show Thomas out. He bows to both of you, his eyes lingering on you for just a moment longer than strictly necessary. When the door closes behind him, your mother turns to you with a satisfied expression. "Well," she says, "it seems the Fairchilds have taken an interest in you." You try to look only mildly pleased. "Mrs. Fairchild is very kind to include us in her musical evening." Your mother gives you a knowing look. "It wasn't Mrs. Fairchild who just called on us, was it?" Before you can respond, the bell rings again. Mary appears moments later. "Miss Charlotte Hartley and Mrs. Hartley, ma'am," she announces. More visitors. The morning call circuit is in full swing. Charlotte enters with her mother, both dressed in the height of fashion. Charlotte looks radiant. Engagement agrees with her, apparently. After the usual pleasantries, Charlotte leans forward slightly, her eyes bright with excitement. "Have you heard about Mrs. Pembroke?" she asks in a low voice. Your mother raises an eyebrow. "What about her?" Mrs. Hartley clucks her tongue. And that, my dear friends, is where we leave our intrepid Victorian heroine for now. Who knows what scandalous gossip awaits, or what new rules she'll accidentally break in her quest for love and acceptance. What do you think of Jane's adventures so far? Would you survive a day in Victorian England, or would you commit a social faux pas before breakfast? Let me know in the comments. Many people romanticise Victorian courtship, picturing stolen glances across ballrooms, passionate love letters, and gentlemen proposing on bended knee. But for most, it was a terrifying gauntlet of bizarre rules, awkward encounters, and social landmines that could ruin your entire future. Dating wasn't about finding your soulmate. It was about not accidentally getting engaged to a stranger because you mishandled a handkerchief. So yeah, if these stories sound interesting to you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Last week, someone from Canada mentioned they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. We're heading back to Victorian England in a minute. First, though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You won't want to move once we get started. Your eyes flutter open in London, 1875. The first thing that hits you is the weight. Something heavy is pressing down on your ribs, squeezing your waist like you're being slowly crushed by a python. You take a shallow breath, that's all you can manage, and realise you've woken up in a corset. And not just any corset, but one cinched so tight you can feel your organs rearranging themselves to make room. "Miss Elena, please hold still. We must have you looking perfect today." That's your lady's maid Agnes, currently attempting to compress your waist to the fashionable 18 inches. You're 21 years old, it's your third season in London, and if you don't secure a husband soon, you'll be well on your way to spinsterhood. Unlike your comfy bed back in 2025, you're perched on the edge of a wooden chair in your dressing room, gripping the sides as Agnes performs what can only be described as socially acceptable torture in the name of beauty. "Your mother insists you look your absolute best today," Agnes continues, giving the laces another brutal tug. "Lady Harrington's tea is very important. I hear Mr. Blackwood will be in attendance." You stifle a groan. Mr. Blackwood, the latest in your mother's parade of suitable matches. He's wealthy, from a good family, and about as interesting as watching paint dry. But he's eligible, and in Victorian England, that trumps personality every single time. I spent a concerning amount of time researching Victorian matchmaking for this story, and let me tell you, dating apps might be a hellscape, but they're nothing compared to the Victorian marriage market. Courtship in the 1800s was basically a real-life game of chess where one wrong move could ruin your entire life. "Agnes," you whisper, "must the corset be so tight? I could hardly breathe at Lady Pembroke's ball last week." "Your mother says a gentleman doesn't want a wife who eats more than a bird," Agnes replies, not easing up one bit. "Now, let's get you into your dress." The dress. A pale blue morning gown with enough layers to clothe a small village. The wire cage crinoline underneath keeps the skirt extended in a perfect bell shape. It looks elegant, but feels like you're wearing a prison. You can't sit properly, can't move quickly, and can't even use the bathroom without a major operation. Not that a proper Victorian lady would ever admit to having bodily functions. The marriage market. Your one and only career. For women, marriage was essentially their career. A bad match could mean a lifetime of misery with no escape. Divorce was nearly impossible, incredibly scandalous, and usually left women destitute. The stakes were impossibly high. Your mother has been up since dawn, Agnes says, arranging your hair. She's determined to see you engaged before the season ends. You know what she isn't saying. Your younger sister is waiting her turn to be introduced to society, and having 2 unmarried daughters doing the rounds at the same time would be both expensive and slightly embarrassing. You're taking up space in the marriage market. Time to move inventory. Picture this. The Victorian marriage market was literally called the season. It ran from April to August when Parliament was in session. Aristocratic and upper-middle-class families would pack up from their country estates and head to London for months of strategically planned social events. The entire purpose? To throw young women and men together in carefully supervised settings so they could find suitable matches. Miss Elena, your mother wants to review your dance card before we leave, Agnes says, pinning the final strands of your hair into place. The dance card was a little booklet attached to your wrist by a ribbon where gentlemen would pencil in which dances they'd reserved with you. A full dance card meant you were popular. An empty one meant you were failing miserably, dating by way of public performance and immediate visible judgment. Fun. Agnes, what if I don't want to marry Mr. Blackwood or any of Mother's choices? Agnes looks at you like you've suggested flying to the moon. Miss Elena, she says quietly, what choice do you have? And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because in Victorian England, particularly for women, choice wasn't really part of the equation. The goal was marriage, preferably advantageous marriage, and the entire society was structured around making that happen. A debut, a dress, and a dossier. The coming-out process had nothing to do with sexuality and everything to do with announcing, "Hello, world, I'm officially on the marriage market." For upper-class girls, this meant being presented at court, literally curtsying before the Queen to signal your debut into society. It was essentially a royal stamp of approval saying, "This one's ready for breeding." Your coming out had been 3 years ago. You remember standing in a line of nervous girls in white dresses with feathers in their hair, waiting to curtsy before Queen Victoria herself. One girl actually fainted. Nobody helped her until after her presentation was complete. Priorities. You look beautiful, Miss Elena, Agnes says, stepping back to admire her work. You stare at yourself in the mirror. You do look beautiful, in the Victorian sense. Pale skin, achieved by staying indoors, a tightly corseted waist, and elaborately styled hair. You're a perfect product, packaged and ready for market. When you head downstairs, your mother is waiting in the drawing room, already dressed in her visiting clothes. She looks you up and down with the critical eye of a livestock judge at a county fair. Elena, dear, turn around. You do a slow spin, and she nods approvingly. The blue brings out your eyes. Mr. Blackwood mentioned he favours blue. Of course he did, and of course she remembered. Your mother has been collecting information on eligible bachelors like she's building a dossier for the Secret Service. Mother, you begin carefully. I was thinking perhaps I might spend some time in the library today instead. Don't be ridiculous, she cuts you off. Lady Harrington has specifically arranged for several eligible gentlemen to be present. It would be most impolite to decline. Translation: get in the carriage, we're going husband hunting. The carriage ride to Lady Harrington's is uncomfortable, both because of your corset and the lecture your mother delivers on property etiquette. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't laugh too loudly. Don't eat too much. Don't sit too close to a gentleman, but also don't be standoffish. It's like trying to navigate a labyrinth blindfolded. And remember, your mother says, as the carriage pulls up to the impressive townhouse, Mr. Blackwood is heir to a considerable fortune. His family owns property in both Kent and Yorkshire. You nod dutifully. Property in Kent and Yorkshire. How thrilling. How romantic. The art of controlled conversation. The footman helps you down from the carriage, and you follow your mother up the steps to Lady Harrington's home. Inside, the drawing room is already filled with people, mostly women in elegant dresses with a strategic sprinkling of eligible bachelors. The men look as uncomfortable as the women look determined. It's a battlefield disguised as a tea party. Mrs. Pembroke, Miss Pembroke, how delightful! Lady Harrington swoops down upon you, air-kissing your mother and examining you with sharp eyes. Elle est la Nina, my dear. You look positively blooming. Come, there are several people you simply must meet. And so it begins. You're paraded around the room like a prize heifer, introduced to a series of gentlemen who all blur together in a sea of side whiskers and polite bows. You make the same small talk about the weather, the season, the latest performance at the theatre. You are careful to seem intelligent enough to not be dull, but not so intelligent as to be threatening. Let me tell you about the Victorian rules for conversation between unmarried men and women, because they're gloriously, hilariously specific. A proper young lady couldn't just start chatting with a man she didn't know. She had to be formally introduced by a mutual acquaintance. Even after an introduction, physical contact was strictly limited. No touching, and definitely no hugging. A gloved hand might be offered for the briefest of handshakes or to be escorted into dinner. Miss Pembroke. A deep voice breaks into your thoughts, and you turn to see a tall man with dark hair and impressively bushy sideburns bowing slightly. I believe we met at Lady Westmorland's ball last month. Henry Blackwood at your service. So this is the famous Mr. Blackwood. You curtsy in response, noting that he is at least better looking than your mother had led you to believe. Not that it matters. His personality could still be as dry as last week's toast. Mr. Blackwood, you respond. How lovely to see you again. I trust you are enjoying the season thus far, he asks, and you launch into the expected script of polite conversation. The thing about Victorian dating is that it was almost impossible to get to know someone properly before marriage. All your interactions were supervised, and all your conversations were limited to approved topics. You were basically expected to decide if you wanted to spend your entire life with someone, based on how well they made small talk about the weather, and whether they could dance a proper quadrille. Would you care to take a turn about the room, Miss Pembroke? Mr. Blackwood asks, offering his arm in a perfectly proper manner. You nod and place your hand lightly on his arm, careful to maintain the appropriate distance between your bodies, close enough to converse, far enough to prevent any improper contact. Your mother, you notice, is watching like a hawk from across the room, a satisfied smile on her face. I understand you enjoy reading, Miss Pembroke, Mr. Blackwood says, as you stroll slowly around the perimeter of the room. May I ask what authors you prefer? You hesitate. This is a trap. If you name something too intellectual, you risk seeming blue-stocking-ish, a term for overly educated women who are considered unmarriageable. If you name something too frivolous, you risk seeming empty-headed. Better to aim for the middle ground. I enjoy Jane Austen, you reply, which is both true and safe, and some poetry. Excellent taste, he nods approvingly. I myself enjoy Sir Walter Scott and Wordsworth. And thus begins the delicate dance of trying to gauge compatibility through the most constrained conversation imaginable. It's like trying to assess someone's entire personality by watching them select produce at a grocery store. Good luck with that. The stakes are high, the choices are few. May I be so bold as to request the honour of calling on you tomorrow afternoon, Miss Pembroke? Mr. Blackwood asks as your circuit of the room nears completion. This is significant. A gentleman requesting to call means he wants to visit you at home. Still chaperoned, of course, which indicates serious interest. Your mother will be ecstatic. I would be delighted, you respond, because what else can you say? The rest of the tea passes in a blur of cucumber sandwiches, lukewarm tea, and stilted conversation. By the time you and your mother return home, your face hurts from maintaining a pleasant expression, and your ribs are screaming for release from the corset. Mr. Blackwood was quite attentive, your mother says, practically glowing with satisfaction, and he's requested to call tomorrow. I knew the blue dress was the right choice. Yes, mother. It was definitely the blue dress that sealed the deal, not the substantial dowry you'll bring to the marriage, or the advantageous connection between our families. He seems nice, you offer, which is about as enthusiastic as you can manage. Nice, my dear. He's perfect. Excellent family, substantial means, and still under 30. You couldn't ask for a better match. You couldn't ask for much of anything in Victorian dating, that was kind of the point. Silent signals and secret languages. Here's the wild thing about Victorian courtship. The rules were so rigid, so formalised, that people had to develop elaborate workarounds just to communicate basic human feelings. Because you couldn't just say, "Hey, I like you," or "Actually, I think you're as boring as wallpaper paste." Instead, you had entire silent languages: the way you held your fan, how you wore your gloves, where you placed your calling card, all to try to convey messages you weren't allowed to speak aloud. "Agnes, please help me out of this dress," you say, once you're back in your room. "I can hardly breathe." As Agnes unlaces your corset, you take your first deep breath in hours. The relief is immediate and intense, like finally getting into your comfy clothes after a day in uncomfortable business wear, but 1,000 times more extreme. "Mr. Blackwood seemed quite taken with you," Agnes comments as she hangs up your dress. "Your mother believes he might propose before the season's end." The thought sends a chill through you. Marriage to Mr. Blackwood, a man you've spoken to for perhaps a total of 30 minutes, always under supervision. A man whose true character, interests, temperament, and habits you know absolutely nothing about. Yet, you're expected to entrust your entire future to him. That night, as you lie in your bed, a four-poster with heavy curtains that can be drawn for warmth and privacy, you stare up at the canopy and consider your options. They are, unfortunately, limited. You could refuse Mr. Blackwood if he proposes, but that would mean continuing on the marriage market, enduring more seasons, more teas, and more awkward conversations with strange men. Your parents would be disappointed, possibly angry. Society would begin to wonder what was wrong with you. Or you could accept, securing your future but tying yourself forever to a man you barely know. There was a darkness to Victorian dating that the romantic novels don't show you. People made desperate choices because the alternatives were worse. Women, especially, had few options outside of marriage. No real career prospects, limited education, and often no independent income. Is it any wonder that Victorian literature is filled with disastrous marriages? They were basically playing relationship roulette with the highest possible stakes. A walk in the park, a test of wills. The next day, Mr. Blackwood calls at exactly the appropriate hour. Not too early to seem eager, not too late to seem disrespectful. He's shown into the drawing room where you wait with your mother, who has strategically arranged herself at the far end of the room, close enough to chaperone, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. "Miss Pembroke," he bows, "you look lovely today." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," you curtsy in return. "Won't you sit down?" He takes a seat across from you, maintaining a proper distance. Your mother pretends to be engrossed in her embroidery, but is clearly listening to every word. "I trust you're well?" he asks. "Very well, thank you," you reply. "And yourself?" "Quite well." An awkward silence falls. This is the problem with Victorian dating small talk. There are only so many polite nothings you can exchange before you run out of approved topics. "I was wondering," Mr. Blackwood says finally, "if you and your mother might do me the honour of accompanying me to the botanical gardens tomorrow. The weather promises to be fair. A public outing, another step in the courtship progression." Your mother looks up from her embroidery, beaming. "We would be delighted," she answers before you can speak. "Wouldn't we, Elena?" "Yes," you say, because again, what choice do you have? That sounds lovely. Mr. Blackwood stays for exactly the appropriate amount of time, not so short as to be rude, not so long as to be presumptuous, before taking his leave with another bow and a promise to call for you at 2 o'clock tomorrow. As soon as he's gone, your mother is by your side, practically vibrating with excitement. "A walk in the gardens, my dear. He's clearly smitten. I wouldn't be surprised if he speaks to your father within the month." "Mother, I've barely spoken to him," you protest. "I hardly know him at all." She pats your hand condescendingly. "Nonsense. Your father and I were engaged after 3 meetings. That's how it's done in proper society. You'll have a lifetime to get acquainted after you're married." The Victorian approach to marriage compatibility was wildly different from ours today. We worry about emotional connection, shared values, and whether someone's Netflix preferences are compatible with ours. Back then, it was all about social standing, financial security, and family connections. Actual personal compatibility was considered a nice bonus if it happened, but certainly not a requirement. That night, as Agnes helps you prepare for bed, she notices your distracted expression. "Troubled thoughts, Miss Elena?" she asks, brushing out your hair. "Agnes, Do you think it's possible to marry for love in our world, or is it always just a business arrangement? Agnes's hands pause briefly before resuming their work. I think, she says carefully, that love can grow where it's planted, but the soil must be right first. Translation. Sure, you might eventually fall in love with Mr. Blackwood, but first make sure he's not going to leave you penniless or treat you badly. You climb into bed, your mind still spinning with thoughts of tomorrow's outing and what it might mean for your future. The mattress is stuffed with horsehair, the luxury option in Victorian times, and your sheets are fine linen. But despite these comforts, sleep feels distant. In the quiet darkness of your bedroom, you wonder what Mr. Blackwood is thinking. Is he lying awake too, contemplating a future with you? Or is he simply checking off boxes on his list of requirements for a suitable wife? Does he care about your thoughts, your dreams, your desires? Or just your dowry and family connections? You'll likely never know. That's the tragedy of Victorian dating. Two people making life-altering decisions based on the barest acquaintance, both wearing masks of propriety that hide their true selves. It's a system designed to create matches, not happiness. As you finally drift towards sleep, your last thought is of tomorrow's garden walk and what new steps in this elaborate courtship dance it might bring. The rules are clear, the expectations set. All that remains is to play your part in this carefully choreographed performance and hope that when the music stops, you find yourself in a partnership you can endure, if not enjoy. The language of fans, flowers, and handkerchiefs. Your body sinks deeper into your modern mattress as you think about how different dating is today compared to Victorian times. How lucky we are to be able to actually get to know someone before committing our lives to them. How fortunate to have choices, independence, and the freedom to express our feelings directly instead of through elaborate codes and signals. The morning of your garden outing dawns bright and clear. Your stomach is in knots, not from excitement, but from the sheer weight of expectations. Yesterday, your mother spent 3 hours coaching you on proper garden walking etiquette, as if strolling through flowers requires specialized training. Agnes, you whisper, as she tightens your corset for the day. What if I trip and fall into a rose bush? Mother would never recover from the shame. Agnes snorts, then quickly composes herself. Miss Elena, just remember to keep a proper distance from Mr. Blackwood, and for heaven's sake don't touch anything without your gloves. Ah, yes, the gloves. In Victorian England, bare hands were practically considered obscene. A proper lady never ever went outdoors with naked hands. The physical barrier of fabric between your skin and the world was just one more way to maintain that precious proper distance between yourself and potential suitors. As Agnes helps you into your walking dress, a slightly less formal outfit that still requires a corset, petticoats, and enough fabric to upholster a sofa, you notice her slipping something into your small handbag. What's that? You ask. Your fan, Agnes says with a meaningful look. The ivory one with the painted birds. Of course, your fan. That seemingly innocent accessory was actually the Victorian woman's secret weapon. I found this amazing book at a museum gift shop, once that translated the Victorian language of the fan, and holy crap, it was basically Morse code with wrist flicks. Museum guides will tell you that women use these signals to communicate secretly with potential suitors across crowded rooms, all while looking perfectly proper. Remember what I taught you, Agnes murmurs as she arranges your hair. The fan is your voice, when your lips must remain silent. Agnes had been the one to teach you the secret language of the fan, knowledge passed down from lady's maid to lady's maid, a covert communication system developed by women who had no other way to express their true feelings in public. Drawing it across your cheek means... Agnes quizzes you. I love you, you respond automatically. Twirling it in the right hand, I wish to be rid of you. Resting it on your right cheek? Yes, left cheek. No. Agnes nods approvingly. Good. Use it wisely. You almost laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here you are, a grown woman, having to resort to elaborate fan movements just to say yes or no to a man. But that was Victorian dating for you. All about indirect communication, hidden messages, and plausible deniability. When the maid announces Mr. Blackwood's arrival at precisely 2 o'clock, you and your mother descend the stairs with practised grace. He stands in the foyer, top hat in hand, looking every inch the proper Victorian gentleman. "Mrs. Pembroke, Miss Pembroke," he bows. "I've brought the carriage. Shall we?" The handkerchief telegraph. The carriage ride to the Botanical Gardens is silent and awkward, with your mother sitting between you and Mr. Blackwood like a human chastity belt. When you arrive, Mr. Blackwood helps first your mother, then you down from the carriage, careful to touch only your gloved hand and only for the briefest moment. The gardens are beautiful, filled with exotic plants from across the British Empire. As you stroll along the gravel paths, your mother deliberately slows her pace, allowing you and Mr. Blackwood to walk slightly ahead, still within sight, but with the illusion of privacy. "I must say, Miss Pembroke," Mr. Blackwood begins, "you look particularly lovely today." "Thank you, sir," you respond, keeping your eyes modestly lowered. "I've been meaning to ask, do you enjoy music? I myself am quite fond of the pianoforte." Are these probing questions about shared interests, the Victorian equivalent of "what's your favourite Netflix show?" "I do enjoy music," you reply, "though I play only tolerably well." "I should very much like to hear you play sometime," he says, and there's a warmth in his voice that wasn't there before. Is he actually interested, or just going through the motions? It's impossible to tell through the thick veil of propriety that covers every interaction. This is when the fan comes into play. As you walk, you open your fan and begin to fan yourself slowly. According to the secret code, this indicates "I am married," which is obviously not true, but you're curious to see if Mr. Blackwood knows the language. His eyes flick to your fan, then back to your face, a slight frown creasing his brow. So, he does know the code. Interesting. You switch tactics, closing your fan and drawing it across your cheek. "I love you." His eyebrows shoot up in surprise. "Miss Pembroke," he says, his voice slightly strained. "Are you feeling quite well? Perhaps the sun is too strong for you." You suppress a smile and switch signals again, this time resting the fan against your left cheek. "No." Now he looks thoroughly confused. "Perhaps we should find some shade," he suggests, clearly trying to make sense of your contradictory messages. The thing about the language of the fan is that it was never standardized. Different etiquette books publish different meanings for the same gestures. What meant "I love you" in one guide might mean "leave me alone" in another. It was a communication system designed for miscommunication. I once read this absolutely bonkers Victorian etiquette guide from 1870 that listed over 20 different fan signals, each with a specific meaning. The author claimed it was the secret language understood by all ladies of quality. But then I found another guide from the same year with completely different interpretations. No wonder everyone was confused. As you continue walking, your mother catches up, perhaps sensing that something unusual is happening. "Ah, the orchid house," she exclaims. "Shall we?" Inside the humid glass structure, exotic orchids bloom in a riot of colours. It's beautiful, but the real attraction is a moment when your mother becomes distracted by a particularly unusual specimen, and you find yourself momentarily alone with Mr. Blackwood behind a large palm. "Miss Pembroke," he says quietly, "I confess I'm having trouble interpreting your signals." So he does know the fan language. You feel a blush creeping up your neck. "I was merely cooling myself," you lie, closing your fan with a snap. "Of course," he nods, but there's a twinkle in his eye that suggests he doesn't believe you for a second. "Though if I may be so bold, if you wish to communicate with me, perhaps words would be clearer than other methods." Is he teasing you? That seems impossibly forward for a Victorian gentleman. But before you can respond, your mother reappears and the moment is gone. The fan wasn't the only secret communication system in the Victorian dating arsenal. There was also the language of flowers, where each bloom carried a specific message. A red rose meant love, of course. But did you know that yellow carnations meant "you have disappointed me," or that striped carnations meant "I cannot be with you"? As you exit the orchid house, a flower seller at the garden gate catches your eye. She's offering small posies for sale, little bunches of mixed flowers tied with ribbon. On impulse, you pause. "Would you like one, miss?" the woman asks, holding out a particularly pretty arrangement of daisies and forget-me-nots. Before you can answer, Mr. Blackwood steps forward. "Allow me," he says, purchasing the posy and presenting it to you with a slight bow. You accept with a curtsy, aware that this small exchange is laden with meaning. A gentleman giving a lady flowers is a significant step in courtship, and these particular flowers, daisies for innocence and forget-me-nots for true love, carry their own message. Did Mr. Blackwood choose this specific posy on purpose? Does he know the language of flowers as well as the language of fans? Or was it simply the prettiest one available? "How thoughtful, Mr. Blackwood," your mother approves, watching the exchange with hawk-like attention. And then there's the handkerchief, another seemingly innocent item loaded with secret meaning. You've tucked one into your sleeve, as every proper lady does. Dropping it accidentally on purpose is a classic move to attract a gentleman's attention. As you continue your walk, you deliberately let your handkerchief slip from your sleeve to the ground. Mr. Blackwood immediately notices. "Miss Pembroke, you've dropped your handkerchief," he says, bending to retrieve it. Now comes the crucial moment. How he returns it will indicate his interest. If he simply hands it back, he's being polite but not particularly interested. If he presses it to his heart before returning it, he's declaring his affection. Mr. Blackwood does neither. Instead, he tucks the handkerchief into his coat pocket with a smile. "I believe it's customary for a gentleman to keep such a token, is it not? With your permission, of course." Your mother looks like she might faint from joy. This is practically a declaration of intent in Victorian terms. "Yes," you manage to say, your face burning. "You may keep it." Congratulations. You've just engaged in the Victorian equivalent of changing your Facebook status to "in a relationship." Look, I'm not making this stuff up. Victorian people wrote actual guidebooks on handkerchief flirting. I found this one journal from 1867 that published a whole system called the handkerchief telegraph. It had signals like drawing it across the lips meant "I desire your acquaintance," and letting it rest on the left cheek meant "no," while the right cheek meant "yes." The journal even warned that these signals should only be used at balls, parties, theatres, and on the street, but never in church, because apparently God draws the line at handkerchief flirting. The modern gaze on a brutal system. By the time you return home from the gardens, you're exhausted, not from physical exertion, but from the mental gymnastics required to navigate Victorian courtship rituals. Every gesture, every word, every glance has been calculated and analysed for hidden meaning. "Well?" your mother demands as soon as Mr. Blackwood has taken his leave. "What did you think of him?" "What can you say? That you spent most of the outing sending mixed signals with your fan just to see if he understood them? That you're still not sure if he chose those flowers randomly, or with specific intent? That you now have one fewer handkerchief but no better understanding of the man who might become your husband? He seems kind, you offer, which is about as enthusiastic as you can honestly be. "Kind?" your mother exclaims. "He's perfect. Did you see how he kept your handkerchief and those flowers? I wouldn't be surprised if he speaks to your father by the end of the week." That sends a jolt of panic through you. So soon, but you've had exactly 2 proper conversations with the man. "Mother, surely that's too quick. We hardly know each other." She waves away your concern. "Nonsense. Your father and I were engaged after 3 meetings. That's how it's done in proper society." The Victorian timetable for courtship could be alarmingly fast by modern standards. Without the luxury of casual dating or getting to know someone over time, decisions had to be made quickly, often based on very limited information. Later that evening, as Agnes helps you prepare for bed, she notices your troubled expression. "Was the outing not to your liking, Miss Elelanena?" she asks, brushing out your hair. "Agnes, how can I possibly decide if Mr. Blackwood would make a good husband? I know nothing about him beyond his manners and his fondness for the pianoforte." Agnes sighs. That's why we have the language of fans and flowers and all the rest, to try to discover a person's true nature when society won't let you ask directly. "But it's also confusing," you protest. "I tried using the fan signals today, and I think I just confused him." Agnes can't help but laugh. The problem with secret languages, Miss Elelanena, is that not everyone reads the same dictionary. That night, as you lie in bed, you think about the day's events, The fan signals, the flowers, the handkerchief. You're a product on a shelf, and Mr. Blackwood is a potential buyer. He's a good match on paper, but you're still not sure if he's the right person for you. But in Victorian England, that wasn't a choice you got to make. You'll never know if he's the man he pretends to be, but you do know that you have to make a choice, and that choice will determine the rest of your life. Makes swiping left seem pretty easy by comparison, doesn't it? Gather round, little one, and settle in. Tonight, we're going to travel back in time to a world of lace, tea, and very, very straight spines. It was a place called the Victorian era, and in this world, manners weren't just about being polite. They were a bewildering and beautiful secret code. Imagine you're not a child in your comfy bed, but a young lady visiting the parlour of a distant, very proper aunt. You've been told to sit up straight, hands folded just so, and never let your back touch the chair. Why? Because in this strange world, posture wasn't just a detail, it was destiny. The unbreakable rule of the spine. You sit with your spine as straight as a ruler, your hands demurely folded in your lap, shoulders back and chin gently tucked. You dare not lean back, for that would suggest laziness, and crossing your legs is simply scandalous. Stretching is for animals, not for proper ladies. In this time, your body spoke before you did. A straight spine showed discipline, poise, and good breeding. Bad posture was deeply suspicious, a sign of moral or spiritual failure. Mothers trained their daughters early, balancing books on their heads during sewing lessons. Some homes even had special posture-correcting chairs, wooden nightmares with no back support that forced you to sit upright for hours while embroidering something you would never use. This scrutiny followed you everywhere, from carriages to churches to ballrooms. Imagine walking into a party where every mother is secretly grading your vertebrae. The way you walked was just as important. You must glide, not march or shuffle. Your feet were meant to barely lift off the floor, toes pointed forward, with your heels making no sound. It's said that some girls were even fitted with backboards, stiff wooden devices strapped to the torso to correct curvature, which felt more like a medieval torture device than a fashion accessory. And here's where it gets especially odd. The obsession with posture wasn't just about beauty, it was a link to your health too. Physicians claimed poor posture squished your organs and ruined your femininity. Yet, despite the importance of a straight spine, corsets, those rib-crushing, lung-collapsing monstrosities, were still the norm. It's a special kind of irony to be judged for bad posture, while your entire torso is being cinched to the width of a baguette. You learn to keep your back rigid even when your emotions are not, practicing smiling without slouching, sitting without sinking, existing without offending. And you realize your spine wasn't just about bone alignment, it was about social alignment. Yours had better match theirs, or else. Generations of women grew up to suffer chronic back pain and pinched nerves, all in the name of respectability. Still, even in the face of absurdity, some found quiet resistance. They added extra padding to their dresses to look more upright or bravely, gloriously, just slouched when no one was looking. Because sometimes survival meant pretending to care about decorum while secretly giving your spine a break. The secret language of the fan. You're getting used to this, aren't you? Your posture is still perfect and your hands are folded just so, but your fingers twitch slightly, reaching for the small folding fan nestled beside your teacup. This fan isn't just for keeping cool, it's your only weapon in this parlour battlefield, and you wield it not for heat, but for communication. In the Victorian world, you weren't allowed to say what you actually thought, so you spoke with a fan, a delicate, fluttering, ostrich-feathered lie detector. This wasn't just dainty flirting, it was a full-blown code system, a tactical espionage tool disguised as an accessory. Speaking openly to a man was scandalous, but passing him a secret message with a flick of your wrist? Perfectly acceptable, as long as no one else caught it. The fan had a whole glossary. Dropping your fan meant we shouldn't be seen together. Snapping it closed quickly meant leave me alone. Resting it against your right cheek meant yes. The left cheek? No. Slowly drawing it across your eyes meant forgive me. And if you covered your heart with it, I love you. Subtlety was survival. Fans were the secret messages of their day. this was a form of power too. In a world where you couldn't vote or own property, a fan was your Morse code, your stylish defence mechanism, and fans were not cheap. A fine lace fan imported from France could cost a small fortune, so not only were you learning a secret language, you were expected to perform it with a fragile piece of artisan craftsmanship. Drop it, break it, and you weren't just clumsy, it was symbolic, like dropping your reputation right onto the parquet floor. The fan wasn't the only accessory under this heavy social microscope, but it was one of the few that gave women a quiet form of power. It's a clever, fluttering rebellion against the very rules it lived within. Women weren't allowed to speak their minds, but they could whisper with silk and feathers. And you wonder how many grand romances, secret affairs, or polite rejections happened without a single word spoken. Finally, picture this. You're at your last ball of the season. You see him across the room, the one you meant to send signals to all week. You try again. A glance, a flutter, a flick. Maybe he catches it, maybe he doesn't. But you hold your fan high, composed, unreadable, because even if you're boiling inside a gown with 37 buttons, you still know how to say everything without saying a word. The pocket crisis. You're getting used to the fan, sort of. At least it gives your hands something to do while you try not to commit the next major faux pas. Tonight's weird etiquette trap is hiding right beneath your skirts, or rather not hiding, because tonight we talk about pockets, or the infuriating lack thereof. You may think a pocket is just a place to stash your lip balm, but in the 1800s pockets were a political statement. Here's the problem. You don't have any. Not real ones, not like the men do. In the 1700s women used to have pockets, big ones too, tied around the waist under layers of skirts. But by the time Queen Victoria took the throne, dresses got tighter, skirts more sculpted, and the idea of cutting a hole in your carefully constructed gown just so you could carry your stuff. Outrageous, indecent even. A visible bulge where a lady stored her handkerchief was simply unthinkable. So you're left with nothing, or worse, you're told to carry a reticule, a tiny decorative handbag the size of a fig. It's dainty and holds approximately 3 things: a coin, a calling card, and the weight of your crushed autonomy. Historians still debate whether this shift was an accident of style or a deliberate act of control. Some suggest that by depriving women of a place to carry items, society kept them more dependent. After all, if you can't carry money, how far can you really go? And so here you are, invited to tea across town. You need a handkerchief, a comb, a key, but you have nowhere to stash it. You have to ask your brother, or worse, your maid. It's not just inconvenient, it's absurd. Men's clothing, by comparison, is a veritable storage system with waistcoat pockets, coat pockets, and secret inside pockets. They're practically portable filing cabinets. And what do you get? A decorative pouch tied with a ribbon, of course. But women, as they tend to do, got creative. Some kept money in their gloves, others stitched hidden pockets into petticoats. One particularly rebellious trick involved sewing tiny compartments inside corsets. The broader truth, however, was stark. You weren't trusted to carry your own stuff. You had no access, no freedom to act without preparation. It's worth noting that this nonsense didn't go unchallenged. As the century progressed, suffragettes made functional pockets for women, part of their broader demand for rights. "It has pockets" has become a modern war cry, a tiny victory shouted from department store fitting rooms. So tonight, as you fumble for your comb, take a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of it all. You live in a world where an entire gender had its carrying capacity surgically removed by a society obsessed with control disguised as fashion. And maybe, just maybe, you tuck a small stone into the hem of your gown, not for use, just to know it's there. The glove gauntlet. You're standing by the doorway, ready to step outside, but something's wrong. You forgot your gloves. Panic sets in, because in the Victorian world, showing up somewhere with bare hands isn't just awkward, it's practically a declaration of social war. Gloves weren't a fashion choice, they were armour. Etiquette demanded them, society enforced them, and scandal lurked in the fingers of the gloveless. Here's the deal. If you're leaving the house, you're wearing gloves. Visiting someone? Gloves. Shopping? Gloves. Attending a funeral, a wedding, a tea party, or a dramatic reading of Tennyson? Gloves. And not just any gloves. The fabric mattered, the length, the colour. Daytime meant light cotton or soft suede. Evenings demanded opera gloves, long, tight and uncomfortable enough to make your fingers consider mutiny. There were rules, dozens of them. You remove your right glove when shaking hands. You never eat with your gloves on, but you don't remove them the moment you enter a room. You wait until the appropriate social cue, usually once your hostess has done it first. Historians still debate whether glove rules were about hygiene, modesty, or just a clever way to keep women busy and confused. To touch bare skin was intimate, scandalous even. A man touching a woman's hand without gloves could ignite a flurry of gossip. A gloved handshake was proper. A bare one was practically a marriage proposal. And yet, gloves weren't just barriers, they were stage props. A lady might accidentally drop one, knowing full well a gentleman would dive to retrieve it. That tiny scrap of fabric would become a relic, but fine gloves were expensive, and if a glove ripped in public, you'd better hope it was your non-dominant hand. Exposed knuckles were social suicide. Gloves were also associated with morality. She's no better than a woman who walks around bare-handed, someone might whisper. Gloves became metaphors for purity and good breeding. To remove them in public was like peeling away propriety. It's no wonder gloves became a favourite prop in novels, usually right before the scandal chapter. So here you are, walking into your aunt's parlour 5 minutes late, hoping no one notices your gloveless state. You keep your hands close to your skirts, maybe you pretend to be chilled, but deep down, you know what the room is thinking. What else has she forgotten? Her modesty? Her morals? Her marriage prospects? It's ridiculous, and yet you feel it. That tiny anxiety, that flutter of shame, all from 10 fingers and no gloves. So next time you slip your hand into a warm glove on a cold morning, spare a thought for your Victorian counterpart. She wasn't just keeping her hands warm, she was keeping her dignity intact, one stitch at a time. The calling card gauntlet. You've survived the glove crisis, bravo, but don't relax just yet. You're now standing outside the home of a Mrs. Hartford Smith, the air thick with the scent of lavender and social anxiety. You're not here for fun. You're here for a calling, a ritual more complicated than chess, and about as enjoyable as doing your taxes in a corset. Welcome to the dizzying etiquette of Victorian visiting cards. These weren't just paper, they were your entire social resume, reputation, and personal brand distilled onto a little rectangle of cardstock. It had to be creamy, tastefully engraved, with no colours, no frills, and absolutely no scent. This was not a love note. This was diplomacy. And you're not just here to say hello. You're performing an elaborate social dance where one wrong move, a premature knock, a misfolded card, can doom your reputation for a full season. You reach into your tiny card case and extract a card with your gloved fingers. You hand it to the maid. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You don't get to walk in. Oh no. If you're not expected, you leave your card at the door, literally. This is leaving one's card, and it is Victorian for just checking in to make sure I'm still part of your acceptable friend tier. Sometimes you fold the top left corner to indicate you're calling in person and not just dropping by. A folded bottom corner meant condolences, an edge turned under meant congratulations. There were so many tiny signals on these cards they might as well have come with subtitles. If your card is accepted and you're invited in, congratulations. You now have to navigate the actual visit. This means entering a drawing room like you're made of lace and self-doubt, perching on the edge of a settee, and preparing for 15 minutes of intense performative civility. No more, no less. Staying too long is rude. Leaving too soon is worse. You must speak politely about the weather or the Queen's latest headache while pretending you're not here purely out of obligation. You may not talk politics. You may not talk religion. You may certainly not talk about how bored you are. Laughter is allowed, but only gently, only with a handkerchief ready. The loud kind of laughter, the one that might suggest joy or confidence, is for taverns and men. Even the storage of these cards was strategic. Most genteel homes kept a silver tray in the entry hall where guests would deposit their cards, and because appearances were everything, some families would fluff up the tray with old cards, to make it seem like they were more in demand than they actually were. That's right, people faked popularity using decorative litter. So as you step back into your carriage, tucking your gloves properly and faking a grateful smile, remember this. In the Victorian world, relationships weren't built with conversations. They were built with paper, polish, and precisely folded corners. And you'd better hope yours said exactly what you meant. The seating hierarchy. You've survived the calling card gauntlet, bravo. But don't relax just yet. You're now at a proper dinner party and everyone is gliding to their assigned seats like human chess pieces. Tonight, the battlefield is the dining room and your weapon is chair placement. Welcome to the world of seating hierarchy, where your social worth could be measured in inches from the host's elbow. First off, you do not choose your seat. No, the hostess does. She arranges the seating in advance with the seriousness of a military campaign. The head of the table is sacred territory. The host and hostess sit at opposite ends. To their immediate right and left are the guests of honor. If you're lucky enough to land a spot near them, congratulations. You're interesting this week. If you're seated near the foot of the table, well, you probably sneezed too loudly at the last garden party. This isn't just dinner, it's a social audit. Your seat tells everyone how the hostess ranks you. Closer means favoured, farther means forgettable. And if you're seated next to someone unpleasant, that's not an accident. It's a message. Now, if you're unmarried, your seating comes with even more layers. Young ladies are often placed strategically near eligible gentlemen, but not too close. That would be obvious. You're expected to sit, glide and smile all at once. When your seat is pulled out, you must lower yourself in one fluid motion. No thuds, no shifting. Your back never touches the chair. Your ankles must remain side by side, hidden under your gown like a secret you'd never dare share. And here's a quirky detail. Women never sat down before the hostess. Ever. You wait until she sits, then you follow her cues. She sneezes. You politely bless yourself. When it comes to conversation, you're only supposed to talk to the person on your left during the first course, then the one on your right for the second. This alternates like a silent, formal dance. This rule was particularly stressful if you happen to be seated next to someone dreadfully boring, like Major Fortescue, who only talks about pigeons. But here's the kicker. This seating ritual was about stability. With so many rules in play, nobody could cause trouble without it being painfully obvious. A young man trying to flirt too boldly with a debutante? Impossible. He's stuck 3 seats down, forced to chat with her cousin. So you learn to endure, you smile, and you pretend not to notice the whispered comment about your gloves. You fold your napkin just right, and you wait, because in this room, silence is strategy, seating is status, and the dinner hasn't even started yet. The perilous stairs. The dinner is over, and your corset is staging a full-blown rebellion. But just when you think you've made it through the evening without social injury, your hostess rises and says, "Shall we take a turn about the drawing room?" Oh no. It's happening. You're going to have to walk in public with people watching, and worse yet, there are stairs. Victorian staircase etiquette was less about architectural navigation and more about avoiding moral collapse. Because somehow, even walking up a flight of stairs could be suggestive if you weren't careful. Here you are, a lady in a gown with 13 pounds of petticoats, and you must ascend with the grace of a duchess on a cloud. Behind you is a gentleman, and this is where things get delicate. In proper Victorian society, a man was never supposed to ascend the stairs directly behind a lady. That would mean he'd be at eye level with her ankles, or worse, her calves. And in this deeply paranoid social ecosystem, that was akin to gazing directly at her inner thoughts. Scandalous. Indecent. The result was that staircase protocol became weirdly specific. The man either had to hang back awkwardly, or if he was bold, go up first so he couldn't ogle anything he wasn't supposed to. It was like a duel of chivalry. After you. Oh, no, I insist, after you. I couldn't possibly. But I might see your shoes. Exactly. And speaking of shoes, those were another problem. Women's hemlines were long, but stairs made them treacherous. One wrong step, and the whole skirt could hike up just enough to flash a glimpse of stocking. So women learned to glide, holding their skirts just high enough to avoid tripping, but not so high that anything suggestive peeked out. You were expected to climb stairs like you weighed nothing, as if gravity itself admired your breeding and decided to ease up a bit. Descending stairs was a different kind of danger. Going down meant your face was visible, but you had to look at the steps, not the people watching. Eye contact while stepping down could be interpreted as boldness, and you never offered your hand unless you stumbled, in which case the appropriate gesture from a gentleman was to catch you and immediately apologize, as if he had done something wrong. It's all about appearances and control. But of course, rebellion existed. Daring women, the rebellious kind who didn't wait for a chaperone at every stairwell, who marched up stone steps without a single glance behind. These were often American women, scandalously independent. British society tolerated them, barely, but only because they were assumed to return home eventually. So back to you. Your foot touches the final stair. You've made it. Your skirt stayed in place. Your gloves didn't catch, and the gentleman behind you stared at the banister like his life depended on it. You step gracefully into the drawing room. One more etiquette obstacle conquered. The handkerchief's secret language. You've survived the stairs barely. But now you're perched once again on the edge of a too-small sofa, sipping tea that tastes like boiled patience. Conversation drifts around you, and you're politely pretending to care. But inside your sleeve, your hand is twitching. Tucked there is your secret weapon, your coded companion, your delicate, damp defender, the handkerchief. In Victorian society, a handkerchief wasn't just a square of fabric, it was a communication device. Folded, dropped, fluttered, or twirled, it sent messages more scandalous than the average dinner party ever dared to voice. The language of fans might have been dramatic, but handkerchiefs were low-key dangerous. Let's start with the basics. Everyone had one, some people had dozens. A lady never blew her nose audibly, that was considered ghastly. A gentle dab at the nostrils was permitted, barely, and only with grace. But beyond the sniffles, handkerchiefs were coded tools. Held neatly in the left hand, it meant, I'm awaiting your approach. Twirled absent-mindedly, I'm bored. Dropped by accident in front of a gentleman. That's no accident, that's bait. And if he picks it up and hands it back with a meaningful glance, well, now it's a courtship. Historians still argue how widespread this handkerchief language really was. Some claim it was just a literary flourish. Others believe women really did master these signals as a workaround to their voiceless roles. After all, when society says you can't speak first, you find other ways to get your message across. Lending someone your handkerchief was an intimate gesture, more intimate than a handshake. Lending it to a man meant something. Accepting one from a man was practically a contract. But sometimes it was weaponized. Think of the passive-aggressive sniff, the carefully timed dab of a dry eye during a dramatic reading. One woman reportedly caused a full household rift by accidentally leaving her lace-trimmed handkerchief on a rival's chair, embroidered with a monogram that wasn't hers. Handkerchiefs also had sentimental weight. They were kept in memory boxes pressed between pages of love letters. They were handed down mother to daughter as tokens of femininity and restraint. They absorbed more than tears. They absorbed history. And then there was the mourning handkerchief, black-edged, starched, and thick with symbolism, used in funerals and periods of grieving that could last for years. So tonight, as you tuck your handkerchief back into your sleeve, carefully folded, scented with rosewater, and embroidered with just the right degree of subtlety, you know its power. It is protection, expression, and sometimes even defiance. And tomorrow, when you see him again, you just might drop it on purpose. The moral compass on your head. It's a new morning. A fresh breeze flutters the lace curtains. You, meanwhile, are locked in your bedroom in a state of absolute panic. Why? Because your hair is wrong. Victorian hair etiquette wasn't just about curls and combs. It was a full-time moral compass perched on your scalp. Your hair says everything before your mouth gets a chance to say anything at all. Hair was sacred, literally. It was tied to virtue and emotional state. Wild hair meant a wild woman. Perfectly coiled ringlets meant modest, well-raised, and just the right amount of repressed. You were expected to wear your hair up, always, unless you were under 13 or mourning. Letting your hair hang loose as a grown woman was reserved for the deeply ill or the artistically unhinged, and your hair had to be styled thoughtfully, tastefully, laboriously. Enter the pins. So many pins. You will spend at least half an hour each morning twisting your hair into a soft yet structured arrangement that looks effortless but requires a small engineering degree. Buns, braids, coils, and the occasional Grecian knot were all in fashion, but not too high. Showy, not too low, slouchy. Somewhere near the back crown of the head seemed safe. Of course, the materials mattered. Hairbrushes with natural bristles, tortoiseshell combs, ivory pins. Hair oil was a must, rose-scented preferably. A greasy sheen was in. Dry hair meant neglect, or worse, poverty. And let's talk about hair washing, or more accurately, the lack thereof. Weekly hair washing wasn't common because water was a production. Instead, they brushed a lot, 100 strokes a night. It wasn't just vanity, it was believed to stimulate the scalp, distribute oils, and prevent moral decay. The truly unhinged part? Hair as a keepsake. Victorians loved to gift locks of hair. Romantic partners exchanged curls tied with ribbon. Mothers snipped baby curls to keep in lockets. Mourning jewellery. Bracelets, brooches, even full wreaths were made from the braided hair of the deceased. It's equal parts touching and morbid. And speaking of mourning, hair rules got even more complicated if you were grieving. For a widow in deep mourning, elaborate hairstyles were frowned upon. You wore your hair low and simple, possibly veiled. You were to look solemn, but still tidy. But here's the twist. Some women loved it. Hair was one of the few aspects of appearance they could control. It was private and public, yours but also society's, and within the tight confines of acceptable style, some found creativity. They developed signature twists, subtle ways to signal rebellion, or at least distinction. And there were outliers. Women who wore their hair shockingly short or scandalously loose. The papers fainted, but the next season the soft fringe bob became a quiet trend among younger ladies. So now, as you adjust the final pin, smooth the last flyaway, and glance one last time in the mirror, you breathe deep. Your hair is perfect, quietly dignified, not too interesting, not too plain. Just enough to earn polite nods from the other ladies, because in the end your hair doesn't just sit there, it speaks. And tonight it says, I know exactly what I'm doing, even if you absolutely, definitely do not. The perilous laugh. You've managed your hair, your gloves, your calling cards. You've climbed the stairs with grace and survived the dinner seating chart unscathed. You're practically royalty until you laugh. Just a little chuckle, a tiny well-earned burst of amusement at Lord Batten's absurd opinion that cucumbers are naturally spicy. And suddenly, the room shifts. Heads turn. Eyebrows twitch. A silence heavier than your bustle settles in. Because tonight, dear friend, you have committed the crime of improper laughter. Victorian women, you see, were expected to express amusement the way one might react to a particularly tasteful doily. With quiet, composed appreciation, anything louder than a mild titter, dangerous. Loud laughter was unladylike, undignified, and worst of all, vulgar. A lady should cover her mouth, not hide her face like a ninja, but delicately, as if catching a butterfly of amusement before it flutters away. The volume must stay low. The eyes can sparkle but not roll. The shoulders may shake slightly, but any indication of a real body involved in the laugh is unthinkable. Etiquette books offered actual instructions on how to laugh. You were to be mirthful, not boisterous, amused, not gleeful. No open mouths, no toothy grins, a smile that lingers. Charming. A giggle that echoes. Dreadful. It wasn't just laughter itself, it was who you laughed at. Making fun of someone above your station dangerous? Laughing with someone of higher status? Risky. Mocking anyone in the room? Utterly off limits. Most safe? Laughing at yourself as long as it was gentle and didn't imply actual self-awareness. Victorian men, by contrast, were encouraged to laugh. Roaring with laughter over port and roast beef was positively masculine. But women were to receive humour, not contribute to it. To laugh gently, or not at all. This disparity didn't go unnoticed. Some women turned it into an art. They mastered the mirror laugh, reflecting the amusement of their companions without betraying what they actually thought. It was emotional ventriloquism. You never laughed first. You never laughed louder. You laughed socially, not emotionally. But the real danger was in laughter that sounded like joy. You laugh loudly and people assume you are bold. Bold becomes brash. Brash becomes dangerous. And suddenly your name is being mentioned in the same breath as actresses, American heiresses, and worst of all, suffragists. It's no wonder that in some private gatherings, women's laughter was still restrained, but genuine. A brief reprieve where they could be human for 15 minutes between tea refills. So now, as you sit on that too small sofa, eyes sparkling but lips barely parted, you release a laugh. Soft, polished, palatable. It floats out into the parlour, lands gently on the floral rug, and disappears. You've passed. But just once, when no one's looking, you allow yourself a real one. Sharp, loud, joyful, and utterly forbidden. The houseguest's ballet. The parlour has quieted, the fire is down to a polite flicker, and the guests are beginning their elaborate goodbyes. But you're staying the night. A guest in someone else's home. A delicate situation requiring supreme grace, silent footsteps, and a well-packed overnight bag. Because in the Victorian era, being a houseguest wasn't just about showing up with flowers and a toothbrush. No, you were expected to perform a hospitality ballet, a precise, exhausting, utterly baffling set of rituals known as guest etiquette. Let's start with your arrival. You never just drop in. You send a note in advance requesting permission to visit. Once inside, you are no longer entirely human. You are a guest, which means you must be delightful, undemanding, and eternally grateful, even if the bed is lumpy and the wash basin smells faintly of mothballs. Your bags are taken up by a servant, and you're led to your room. There's a pitcher of water, a comb you probably won't use, and a bell pull cord that you are absolutely terrified to touch. What if you summon someone by accident? So you don't touch it. Then comes the guest book. Many homes kept one, a large leather-bound tome in which you are expected to write your name, date of arrival, and perhaps a sentiment like, "So honoured to be among such dear friends." Anything less than syrupy flattery marked you as ungrateful. You don't compliment the food too much. Doing so implies surprise, as if to say, "What delicious roast partridge." Sounds like, "I didn't expect this dump to serve edible game." So you keep it modest. So agreeable, you might murmur. Quite a pleasing texture. Food is not about pleasure, it's about civility. The rest of the day is structured. Morning walks, reading in the drawing room, maybe croquet if the host is feeling whimsical. And you are expected to participate. Declining an activity without a very good excuse is considered rude. And what if you want privacy? Hilarious. You have none. Your room may not lock, and Victorian houses, for all their grandeur, were often draughty and creaky. Everyone hears everything, so you tread lightly, cough discreetly, and do not slam doors under any circumstances. And when it's time to leave, you do not simply pack and go. You must say goodbye to every member of the household, leave a final note or small token for your hostess, and express hope that you have not disturbed the serenity of her home. There's even a belief that overstaying your welcome brings misfortune. 3 nights is civility, said one etiquette book. 4 invites fate. So you time your departure with surgical precision, and once you're gone, the host will definitely talk about you. She was punctual to breakfast. He walked too heavily. Her boots left a mark. These aren't just comments, they're votes on whether you'll be invited again. So, as you climb into the carriage, gloved hands folded, hat perfectly centered, you allow yourself a breath of relief. You didn't break anything. You didn't overstay. You didn't get caught humming in the hallway. You were the perfect Victorian guest, even if you secretly hate croquet. Letters, ink, and silent secrets. You've returned from your house visit, gracefully declined a 3rd slice of boiled pudding, and your hair still smells faintly of someone else's lavender soap. But before you can collapse in a grateful heap, you remember you've got to write letters, and not just any letters. proper ones. Because in the Victorian world, communication wasn't just about saying the right thing. It was about writing the right thing with the right ink on the right paper, folded the right way, sealed with the right wax, and scented with the appropriate level of tragedy. Your writing paper must be cream or pale blue. A subtle monogram is acceptable, provided it doesn't scream, "I designed this myself with dreams of grandeur." Envelopes, ungummed. You seal them with wax, of course. And yes, there is a correct wax for every occasion. Bright red is romantic, black wax is for mourning, blue is for friendships. Your ink must be black or dark blue. Violet is flirtatious, and green ink, as we've noted, is for rebels and poets. But now you add your secret ingredient, scent. Some women dip their letter paper in rose water or orange blossom before drying it flat between books. Others dabbed perfume on a separate sheet and slipped it into the envelope as a scented decoy. A letter that smelled faintly of lavender was familial. One dabbed with violet was romantic. Gardenia, bold, jasmine, suggestive, musk. Now you're playing with fire and everyone knows it. And then there was what you wrote. Victorian letter writing was emotional ballet. Every line had layers. "I trust this finds you in good health" could secretly mean, "I've been thinking of you at odd hours." You might reference an object. "The book you lent me has been a fine companion," as a code for, "I'm not entirely over our last conversation." The letters could be read aloud, so whatever you wrote needed to withstand public scrutiny. Many women even drafted their letters on scrap paper first, editing for tone and margin alignment. And once your letter is perfectly crafted, you fold it in thirds, tuck it into the envelope with the writing facing inward, then melt a bit of sealing wax and voila. One socially safe communication ready to be delivered. But what about letters you receive? You wait. Responding too quickly makes you look overeager. Waiting too long makes you seem aloof. The sweet spot? 3 to 5 days. One fringe favourite technique involved warming the envelope slightly before delivery, enough to awaken the perfume and ensure it hit the recipient right in the nostalgia. Of course, the risk of discovery was high. Imagine your brother accidentally warming your letter to dry a raindrop, and suddenly learning that you think Lady Bovington's wig is shaped like a confused hedgehog. So tonight, as you tuck your final folded missive into its envelope, seal it with wax and whisper, "Please don't fall into the wrong hands," you feel a flicker of satisfaction. Because in a world where speaking too freely was dangerous, writing became an act of quiet rebellion. And your rebellion smells faintly of lavender and heartbreak. The chair-warming scandal. You've written your letters, and you're back in the drawing room for another polite social gathering. The tea is tepid, and Lord Pelham is once again attempting to explain why the Crimean War was good for morale. You need to sit down desperately, but you can't. Not in that inviting armchair by the hearth, because it's still warm. Welcome to the bizarre social phenomenon of chair warming, and why Victorian women had to be hyper-aware of where and when they sat. In polite society, sitting in a warm seat, especially one recently vacated by a man, was considered vaguely inappropriate. Why? Because it suggested intimacy, bodily heat, presence. In a world that flinched at the sight of an uncovered wrist, the lingering warmth of someone's posterior was just too much. This rule, of course, applied mostly to women. Men could plop into any seat without much thought. But for women, the etiquette was layered, awkward, and full of potential peril. Say a gentleman had been sitting in the window seat. He stands up to fetch tea. The seat is now vacant, yes, but it is also contaminated. You, the observant and ever so proper lady, must now wait. How long? Enough for the chair to cool, a few minutes at least. It gets worse. If you do sit down, and someone notices, a raised eyebrow, a glance between friends, a note made for future gossip. Miss Trenworth sat in Sir Edmund's chair, still warm, shameless. Historians are divided on whether this rule was widespread or more of a fringe fixation, but either way, the implications were real. A woman's relationship to furniture wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. Even the act of claiming a chair was tricky. You were supposed to hover politely, perhaps float by, and happen to rest when someone insisted. And if a gentleman offered you a seat, you were to hesitate, protest once, maybe twice before accepting. too eager, and you risked seeming forward. The goal was to appear as though you were doing him a favour by allowing yourself to be seated. And let's not forget how you rose from a chair. Not too fast, you might seem startled. Not too slow, you might seem reluctant. You pressed your gloved hands on the armrests, leaned slightly forward, and rose as if lifted by an invisible string. If your skirts swished, fine. If anything got caught in the upholstery and required tugging, ruinous. So now, back to you. You're hovering, carefully scanning the room. That chair by the fire is empty, but it was occupied moments ago by Captain Frobisher. You decide to wait, casually perch on the edge of a nearby footstool, and smile serenely. You are neither so bold as to invade a man's warmth, nor so fragile as to collapse without cushioning. You're a woman of elegance, of restraint, of internalized seating anxiety. And when another chair opens, fully cooled, socially neutral, with just the right balance of form and fabric, you glide into it with the poise of someone who spent her entire life preparing for this exact moment. The parlour tightrope. You've claimed your seat with all the grace of a duchess on a cloud and managed to fold yourself into it without flashing a single petticoat ruffle. Your posture is textbook, but now you've reached the most treacherous terrain in the Victorian household. The parlour. This wasn't just a sitting room. It was the social proving ground, the place where reputations were built, broken and embroidered over. As you cross the threshold into the parlour, you're already being observed. You must greet the hostess first. Always. A simple nod won't do. You need a slight curtsy and a few pleasantries like, "What a lovely arrangement of rhododendrons." Then if the room is full, you must select your spot carefully. The parlour is socially zoned like a chessboard. Near the fireplace is where the older ladies gather. By the piano, young hopefuls. Near the window, dangerous, too exposed to scrutiny. You find a spot on a love seat that already has a chaperone, a friendly matron perched on one side. Perfect. You're immediately seen as respectable and not lurking for flirtation. Then begins the parlour dance. Small talk. Not real talk, not opinions, not honesty. You might discuss the weather, the most recent charity fete, or a recent sermon. But the second you drift toward controversy, say the Irish question, or even a bold thought about Mrs. Montgomery's new bonnet, you've overstepped. You nod more than you speak. You laugh gently. You speak only when spoken to, unless you're introduced and prompted with a question. It's not a conversation, it's a performance of harmony. And then there's the piano, the parlour's crown jewel and its greatest curse. If you play, you must pretend not to want to. The hostess may say, "Won't you favour us with a piece?" You must demur at least once. "Oh, I'm out of practice," but refuse a third time and you risk looking like a killjoy. When you finally sit, you play something modest, a light waltz, a Chopin prelude, something to say, "I am educated, but not. I'm auditioning for the Paris Conservatoire." The most dangerous subject of all? Men. You do not bring up a gentleman unless he's royal, dead, or both. Even referencing your own brothers or cousins too frequently could be seen as a subtle way of parading connections. And heaven forbid you mention a gentleman's appearance. One innocent remark about someone's shoulders, and suddenly you're branded as bold. So tonight, as you sip your imaginary tea and nod along to a very tedious discussion about corn yields, you know exactly how to survive. You ask polite questions, you feign interest, and when someone dares to say something real, you pause, smile, and offer them a lifeline. How about those rhododendrons this year? The ankle scandal. So you've learned how to sit, speak, walk, and even blink like a lady of impeccable Victorian decorum. But what if, in a moment of unguarded impulse or gasp, curiosity, you wanted to speak to a man alone, in private? Well, you couldn't. Welcome to the unnerving realm of the Victorian chaperone system, where no interaction between a proper young lady and a gentleman could be left to chance. If you wanted to talk to a man, you needed a witness, a buffer, a walking, breathing embodiment of social caution. Your chaperone, your mother, your older sister, or a vigilant aunt, had one job: to observe, redirect, and if necessary, intervene. Unsupervised conversations between unmarried men and women were potential ticking scandals. A 5-minute chat on a park bench could fuel weeks of gossip. A walk in the garden without a third party. You may as well start planning the wedding or the exile. The rules were stiflingly clear. If a gentleman called upon you, he did so in the presence of your family. If he wrote to you, the letter was often read aloud by a third party first. If you met him in public, you could only speak if introduced, and never for longer than it takes to comment on the weather. If he invited you anywhere, the answer was always a polite no. This system either protected women or imprisoned them. Some say it gave women the protection they needed in a society obsessed with appearances. Others claim it was a method of control, ensuring every interaction could be monitored and judged. A lax chaperone was just as scandalous as an unattended girl. If Mrs. Southworth allowed her niece to speak to the curate for more than 10 minutes, people started asking, why? But the system wasn't entirely without cracks. Some clever women used their chaperones as cover. You might plan a walk through the park, and while your chaperone pauses to admire swans or lament the decline of moral poetry, you exchange quick words or even a handkerchief with your suitor. This was risky, thrilling, and often the only way to advance a relationship beyond polite weather commentary. So tonight, as you imagine yourself in your prim walking dress, you glance to your left. There she is, your chaperone, watching, waiting, ready to protect you or prevent you, depending on the moment. And you realize every step you take is shadowed not by danger, but by a very polite, very firm, very unshakable presence. The dance card and the waltz. You've withstood the chaperones, the language of lace, and the perilous world of conversational restraint. But now it's time to enter the true Colosseum of Victorian etiquette, the ballroom floor. In the Victorian era, a dance wasn't just a dance, it was a statement, a strategy, a public declaration of alignment and interest. It began with the dance card. You arrive at the ball and you're handed a small, dainty booklet. Inside are numbered slots for each dance of the evening. Your job to fill them with gentlemen's names, but not just any names. Your dance card had to balance social obligation with subtle ambition. Family, friends, dull cousins, and your chaperone's favourite vicar all required a slot. Leave them out, and someone would definitely notice. This isn't Tinder. You're not allowed to switch partners mid-dance, and heaven forbid you accept 2 dances from the same man before you're engaged. Dancing twice with a man in a single evening meant something. It might not scream engaged, but it certainly whispered interested, and whispers travelled fast. Now, let's talk about the waltz. Ah, yes, the waltz. That slow, rotating, mildly scandalous embrace that changed the Victorian dance scene forever. When it first arrived, it caused absolute panic. Why? Because it involved touching, real, gloved, breath-sharing proximity. Before the waltz, dances were more like synchronized promenades. But the waltz, that was chest to chest, well, corset to coat, arms around waists, a brief yet blazing bubble of intimacy right in the middle of a chandelier-lit battlefield. At first, only married couples or daring debutantes attempted it, but as the years progressed, it became socially acceptable, with supervision. Your chaperone still watched from the sidelines like a hawk in pearls. The trickiest part was ending the dance. At its conclusion, your partner bowed, you curtsied, and he escorted you to your seat. Public delivery was mandatory. You exchanged the briefest of pleasantries, and then he vanished, or circled back to hover just enough to be noticed. And sometimes a girl might simply not dance. Maybe she was ill, or mourning, or making a silent protest. In those cases, she might sit quietly, her card blank, her gaze neutral. But that came with its own peril, the dreaded wallflower label. Wallflowers were women who, for whatever reason, weren't asked to dance. Once labelled, it was hard to shake. So tonight, as the string quartet strikes up a familiar tune, you glide onto the floor. Your gloves are tight, your card is full. You take your partner's hand, you step, and for a few dizzying moments beneath the gaslight and gilded cornices, you're not just a young lady surviving etiquette. You are dancing on the edge of danger, one turn at a time. The dinner table minefield. By now, you've successfully navigated the drawing room, decoded glances, waltzed with restraint, and survived the judgmental stares of every embroidered sofa in sight. But all of that fades in comparison to the most terrifying arena in Victorian society, the dinner table. This wasn't just about eating, it was about performing a flawlessly choreographed act of elegance while covered in lace and surrounded by gravy-based landmines. You're seated between two gentlemen, strategically chosen by the hostess, and your job for the next 2 hours is to make small talk, eat without chewing audibly, and avoid committing one of the many dining taboos. Let's begin with the napkin. It's placed delicately on your lap, not tucked into your collar. You unfold it quietly and place it across your lap, as if it just drifted there by accident. Wipe your mouth discreetly. Never wipe your face. Never, under any circumstance, drop it. Dropping your napkin could mean disaster. If you bend down to grab it, you risk flashing a glimpse of ankle. Then, the cutlery situation. There is so much of it, aligned like battalions, and the rule is simple: work from the outside in. But in the panic of the moment, your mind goes blank. You glance to your left, you glance to your right, you copy them, you survive. But the real horror is the food itself. Victorian cuisine could be elaborate, unidentifiable, or just aggressively slimy. Jellied eels, brain cutlets, and boiled calves' feet were all fair game, and you must eat it politely. Take small bites, chew with your mouth closed. Never speak with food in your mouth. Never salt your food before tasting it. That implies you doubt the cook's ability, which is grounds for exile. If you dislike something, just leave it quietly. Making a face or pushing it aside will earn you a permanent slot on the scandal roster. And then we have the sauce conundrum. Sauces were everywhere, and they were dangerous. They dripped, they splashed, they betrayed. One flick of the wrist, and suddenly your elbow-length gloves are covered in a horrific terrine. Historians still debate whether the overuse of sauces was a culinary preference or a societal tactic to test composure under fire. After all, if you can maintain elegance with hot goose fat dribbling across your crinoline, you can handle anything. The end of dinner, even that was regimented. The hostess would give a subtle signal and the ladies would rise, leaving their napkins behind. They would sweep out of the room like a bouquet of whispering ghosts, heading for the drawing room while the men remained for cigars and politics. Once in the drawing room, you resumed your ladylike duties, polite conversation, quiet sighs, and pretending you definitely didn't almost sneeze into a salmon mousse. Mourning, the gown of grief. The soup is settled, the lace gloves are peeled away, and you've survived yet another night of social survivalism. But now comes the most emotionally exhausting performance of all, one that requires no fans, no forks, no coy glances. Mourning. Because when someone in your life dies in Victorian England, you don't just grieve, you enter a rigid, multi-phase mourning ritual that could dominate your clothing and your social life for up to 2.5 years. Let's say your cousin, or heaven forbid your husband, passes away. Your sadness is expected, but your mourning behaviour must be flawless, starting with your wardrobe. You don't simply wear black, you wear mourning black, matte, non-reflective, often dyed with logwood. No jewellery, unless it's jet or made from human hair. Yes, hair. Mourning jewellery often featured woven locks from the deceased, worn in rings, brooches or lockets. It's romantic, maybe, and undeniably creepy. For a widow, this period of deep mourning lasts at least 1 year and a day. During that time, your wardrobe is basically a fashion prison. Black bombazine, crepe veils, jet jewellery, and bonnets so heavy with symbolism they could double as tombstones. No visiting, no attending social functions, no music, no smiling too much, and definitely no dancing. After a year, you might shift into half mourning. This meant you could wear grey or lavender, but not both at once. You might rejoin society in small, controlled ways. Even in grief, the etiquette was competitive. One woman wore mourning for 3 full years after her husband's death, earning her the nickname the Eternal Widow. Another was criticised for returning to church only 6 months after her brother's passing. Historians still argue whether this elaborate grief etiquette offered comfort or cruelty. Some say it gave structure to overwhelming emotion. Others believe it was designed to police women's behaviour, turning natural sorrow into a theatre of endless denial. Men had mourning rules too, but theirs were simpler, shorter, and, surprise, far more forgiving. A black armband, a dark suit, and after a few months life resumed. Women, however, were expected to carry the visible burden of grief like a full-time job. To forget to mourn correctly could jeopardize not only your social standing, but also your moral reputation. A cheerful widow? Untrustworthy. A laughing mourner? Indecent. But through all this there was power in mourning, the power to set boundaries, to opt out of the marriage market, to claim space in a world that rarely allowed women to define their own roles. In the crepe and jet and silence, some found freedom, albeit cloaked in sorrow. So tonight, as you imagine yourself in the flickering candlelight of a darkened drawing room, your dress is heavy, your veil drawn. Your grief is visible, curated, and officially sanctioned. You sip your tea in silence, and for once, nobody expects you to smile. The veil of night. And now, finally, you let the veil fall away. Not the mourning kind, but the gauzy, imaginative one we've worn together tonight. The corsets unclasp, the gloves slip off, the ballroom hush fades. You're no longer balancing teacups, decoding fan signals, or avoiding eye contact. You're just here, still breathing. The strange rules, the endless posture checks, the swirling dance of Victorian expectations, it all melts into a soft, distant fog, like a parlour mirror gently fogged over, hiding sharp edges, smoothing the outlines of a world that was at once impossibly rigid and absurdly theatrical. Let your shoulders sink into the mattress now. Feel the tension ebb away like the final notes of a string quartet echoing down the hall. No more etiquette, no more whispered judgments, just you, weightless, drifting through velvet dark stillness. The night deepens, the world outside hushes. The bustle of 1,000 silent rules, the creak of morning gowns, the clink of a spoon against bone china, all of it fades. What's left is quiet, safe, simple. You are no longer performing. You are resting. Let yourself surrender to that slowness, that hush. Let your breathing stretch out like a curtain being drawn. You've survived the unspoken code of an entire era. Now it's time to sleep, not under the rules of society, but beneath the calm of your own soft quiet. You did well tonight. Sleep deeply now, knowing the world will still be there in the morning, just a little less corseted.